The January rain tapped against the windows of their cramped Seattle apartment as Emily Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard. Lines of code appeared on the screen, elegant in their complexity. At 37, she'd spent nearly half her life writing code, but this was different. This was their future. What if we could predict security breaches before they happen? Michael Anderson paced behind her, excitement brightening his blue eyes. Not just react to them, but actually see them coming. Emily looked up, pushing her glasses back into place. Her dark hair was tied in a messy bun, and she hadn't changed out of her MIT sweatshirt in 2 days. "I can build that," she said, the confidence in her voice unwavering. "Give me 3 months and I'll create something nobody's ever seen before." Michael stopped pacing. At 39, he still had the restless energy of a younger man, the drive that had first attracted Emily to him when they met at a tech conference 4 years ago. He leaned down and kissed her, right there among the chaos of their makeshift office, empty pizza boxes, half-drunk cups of coffee, and whiteboards covered in algorithms. "This is why I love you, Em. You make the impossible possible." That night, they sketched out what would become safeguard systems on the backs of grocery receipts in old envelopes. Emily's technical vision combined with Michael's business acumen felt like magic, a perfect partnership. 50-50. Michael had promised, holding her hands at 2 in the morning as the rain continued outside. "We're partners in everything. Your dreams are my dreams." Emily believed him completely. Those early days were a blur of 18-hour workdays surviving on convenience store sandwiches and pure determination. While Emily lived in the code building, their platform line by line, function by function, Michael handled the business side, finding investors, sweet-talking, potential clients, managing the books. Their wedding happened right in the middle of launching their first major product. Emily wore a simple white dress she bought online for $200, and they got married at the courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon because they couldn't afford to take a whole weekend off. "We're partners in everything," Michael whispered at the altar, just for her to hear. 50-50 in business and in life. The vows meant everything to Emily. An only child of immigrant parents who had sacrificed everything for her education, she had always struggled with feeling truly seen. In Michael, she'd found someone who valued her mind as much as her heart. 6 months later, they were still working out of the apartment when Emily completed the core algorithm that would change everything. "It's ready," she said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "I've trained it on every known attack pattern from the last decade plus theoretical variants. It doesn't just identify threats, it predicts them." Michael looked at the screen, trying to comprehend the complexity of what she'd created. He couldn't understand all the technical details. His background was in business. Not advanced computer science, but he understood enough to know this was revolutionary. "You're a genius," he said, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "My brilliant, beautiful wife has just changed the cybersecurity game forever." The first real test came when a small regional bank agreed to let them install a beta version of their software. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then at 3:17 a.m. on a Wednesday, Emily's phone rang. "Something's happening," she told Michael as she sat up in bed, already reaching for her laptop. "The system is detecting unusual patterns." They watched in real time as Safeguard identified a sophisticated attack attempt before it breached the bank's defenses. The algorithm didn't just stop the attack, it predicted exactly which vulnerabilities the hackers would target next and sealed them preemptively. The bank's security team was stunned. "We've never seen anything like this," their chief security officer admitted. "You didn't just block the attack, you anticipated the entire sequence before it happened." When Michael negotiated their first real contract a week later, it was for 10 times the amount they'd initially hoped for. That night, they celebrated with champagne on their fire escape, watching the Seattle skyline shimmer through the drizzle. "This is just the beginning," Michael said, raising his plastic cup. "Next year, we'll have a real office. In 5 years, everyone in tech will know Safeguard systems." "As long as we're building it together," Emily replied, clinking her cup against his. Within 18 months, Safeguard systems had moved from their apartment to a real office space. Nothing fancy, just a converted warehouse with exposed pipes and concrete floors. They hired their first employees, 2 junior developers to help Emily, a salesperson, to support Michael, and an office manager to keep everything running smoothly. The changes were small at first, so small that Emily didn't notice them. During Monday morning meetings, Michael began interrupting her when she explained technical updates to their team. "What Emily means is, He'd say, then proceed to explain her own work back to her in simpler terms. When she confronted him about it later, he'd laugh it off. I'm just trying to help, honey. You know how you get lost in the technical details sometimes. Not everyone speaks fluent code like you do. Then came the client presentations. Emily would spend days preparing demonstrations of their newest features, only to have Michael take over the presentation halfway through. Emily's our technical genius, he'd tell clients with a smile. She makes the magic happen behind the scenes. Let me translate the technical jargon into business benefits for you. Behind the scenes. That's where he wanted her. Emily tried to ignore the unease growing in her stomach. After all, Michael was right. She wasn't as comfortable with the spotlight as he was. Maybe this division of labor made sense. The day Vanessa Reynolds walked into their office for her interview, Emily actually felt relieved. Finally, another woman in their boys' club of programmers and sales guys. With her Harvard MBA perfect blowout and 5 years of experience at Microsoft, Vanessa seemed like exactly what their growing company needed. She's perfect, Emily told Michael after the interview. She understands operations in a way we desperately need. He hired her the next day. Vanessa fit into their company culture immediately. She reorganized their chaotic filing systems, streamlined their client onboarding process, and somehow made their disaster of a supply closet actually functional. She brought homemade cookies to meetings and remembered everyone's birthdays. Emily thought she'd found a friend. The late nights started about 2 months after Vanessa joined. First, it was preparing for a major client pitch. Then it was restructuring the sales department. Then it was strategic planning for the next quarter. Always something urgent, always something that couldn't wait until morning. You head home, Michael would tell Emily around 7 p.m. Vanessa and I need to finish these revenue projections. Don't wait up. Emily would drive home alone to their empty house. They'd finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom in the suburbs. She'd heat up leftover Chinese food and fall asleep on the couch waiting for him waking up when he crawled into bed at 2 or 3 a.m. smelling like unfamiliar perfume. You're imagining things, he said when Emily finally worked up the courage to ask. Vanessa wears the same perfume half the women in Seattle wear. You're being paranoid. Was she? Emily started doubting herself, questioning her instincts. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe the stress of growing the company was making her see problems where there weren't any. After all, Michael loved her. They'd built this company together. They were partners. The board meeting in September should have been Emily's moment of triumph. She'd just completed a major platform upgrade that increased their processing speed by 300%. Their clients were ecstatic. But when Michael presented to their investors, her breakthrough became a team effort led by our technical department. Don't you mean led by Emily? Richard Blackwell, their lead investor, had asked. Michael laughed. Of course, Emily's our CTO, but she'll be the first to tell you this was a collaborative effort. Emily sat there frozen, unable to contradict him in front of the board. Vanessa took notes beside him, her expression neutral, professional, just doing her job. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay beside Michael, listening to his breathing, and realized something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't their company anymore. Somewhere along the way, it had become his company, and she was just another employee who happened to share his bed. The next morning, Emily started paying closer attention. She noticed how Vanessa always positioned herself next to Michael in meetings, how she touched his arm when she laughed at his jokes, how he'd started using we when talking about decisions, but the we meant him and Vanessa, not him and Emily. Emily told herself she was being ridiculous, jealous, insecure, all the things Michael accused her of being when she tried to talk to him about it. But deep down in that place where we store truths we're not ready to face, she knew her perfect life was already gone. She just hadn't admitted it yet. That October afternoon started like any other. Emily had picked up Thai food from Michael's favorite place downtown, the one with the red awning and the owner who always remembered their orders: pad Thai, extra spicy, just how he liked it. She balanced the takeout bags in one hand and used her key card with the other, heading straight for his corner office. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. She remembered because she just checked her phone, making sure she wasn't interrupting his 300 conference call. His office door was cracked open. She could hear voices from the conference room down the hall, including Michael's distinctive laugh. Good, his meeting had moved. She pushed the door open with her hip, ready to leave the food on his desk as a surprise. Vanessa's silver laptop sat open on his desk, still logged in the screen, bright and demanding attention. Emily should have just closed it, should have left the food and walked away. But there was something about seeing Vanessa's personal computer in Michael's private space that made her pause. The screen displayed her email, and the preview of the top message made Emily's stomach tighten. Can't wait for this weekend. The cabin is perfect for what we discussed. From Michael's email address. Emily set the food down slowly, her eyes fixed on that screen. Her finger hovered over the trackpad for just a second before she scrolled down. The next email's preview read, "Once Emily is out, we can restructure everything." The Thai food smell suddenly made her nauseated. She sank into Michael's chair and started reading. Really reading. Email after email, a correspondence stretching back 4 months. Her husband and Vanessa weren't just having an affair. They were planning a complete takeover of the company. Her company, the platform she'd coded with her own hands. "The board trusts me completely," Michael had written 3 weeks ago. "When I tell them Emily's been unstable and her work is suffering, they'll support the termination. 48% ownership means nothing if she's voted out for cause." Vanessa's response was even worse. "The documentation I've been creating will support that narrative. Every time she questions your decisions, I note it as aggressive behavior. Every time she works from home, it's absence without proper communication." "We have enough." Emily grabbed her phone and started taking photos. Quick, sharp clicks capturing every damning word. Her hands stayed steady even as her chest felt like it might explode. 23 photos. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway. She closed the laptop carefully exactly as she'd found it and was unwrapping the Thai food when Michael walked in with 2 other executives. "Honey?" His face lit up with what she now recognized as practiced affection. "What a nice surprise." "Thought you might be hungry." She managed her voice somehow normal. "Hi, Tom. Hi, David." They exchanged pleasantries while Emily played the loving wife, mentioning she had to get back to debugging the new security protocol. Michael kissed her cheek, a performance for his colleagues, and she left walking steadily until she reached the parking garage where she threw up beside her car. That night, she lay next to Michael while he scrolled through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something. Was he texting Vanessa, planning their weekend at some cabin? She studied his profile in the blue light of his screen, this stranger wearing her husband's face. "Everything okay?" he asked without looking at her. "You were quiet at dinner." "Just tired. The new protocol is complex." "Maybe you should take a break. You've been pushing yourself pretty hard lately." There it was, the groundwork for her instability. Emily made a non-committal sound and turned away, her mind racing. They were planning to force her out, but when? How much time did she have? The next morning after Michael left for his gym session, Emily opened her laptop and began her real work. Not the security protocol, something far more important. She started documenting everything. Every contribution she'd made to the company, every piece of code she'd written, every innovation that had come from her work. She created encrypted folders backed up to 3 different cloud services under accounts Michael didn't know existed. Then she started recording. She bought a tiny voice recorder from a spy shop downtown, paying cash while wearing sunglasses like some character in a bad movie. But it worked. She recorded meetings where Michael presented her ideas as his own. She recorded him telling potential investors that she was just the technical support, while he was the visionary. The hardest part was continuing to sleep next to him, continuing to kiss him goodbye in the mornings, continuing to pretend she didn't know he was destroying everything they'd built together while planning a future with another woman. Some nights she'd lie awake until 3 or 4 in the morning, working on her laptop while he snored beside her. But this wasn't destructive code. This was protection. She embedded digital signatures into every major system she'd built, invisible markers that would prove the code was hers. She created authentication systems that would verify her as the original author. Each line was carefully crafted to be completely undetectable during normal operations. "You're working too much," Michael said one morning, finding her asleep at her desk at home. "Maybe we should talk about reducing your responsibilities." Another brick in their wall. Emily started seeing Dr. Lauren Morgan, a therapist in Tacoma, far enough away that she wouldn't run into anyone from work. She paid cash, gave a fake last name, and poured out her story to a stranger who handed her tissues and told her she wasn't crazy. "Gaslighting," Dr. Morgan said during their 3rd session. "What you're describing is textbook emotional manipulation." "But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid?" De Morgan looked at her over her glasses. You have photographic evidence of their affair and conspiracy. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. November turned into December. The company holiday party was torture, watching Michael and Vanessa carefully maintain professional distance while their eyes found each other across the room. Emily wore her best dress and smiled until her face hurt, playing the devoted wife and dedicated CTO. Emily is the heart of our technical team, Michael told everyone during his toast. Past tense, Emily noticed. Not is creating or is building, just the heart, something that could be replaced. 2 weeks before Christmas, Emily heard them on a conference call they didn't know she was part of. She dialed in early to a board meeting, and they were using the line thinking they were alone. After the new year, Michael was saying, "We'll do it in January. Clean start." "The divorce papers," Vanessa asked. "Same day. Rip the Band-Aid off. By February, you'll officially be COO, and we can stop sneaking around." Emily muted her line and listened to them plan her professional and personal execution, taking notes in her encrypted journal. January. She had less than a month to prepare. That night, Emily worked until dawn, not on company code, but on her insurance policy. Every system she'd built for Safeguard had a heartbeat, a rhythm she knew better than anyone. She didn't create destruction, she created verification. Hidden within the code were timestamps, signatures, and documentation that would prove her authorship beyond any doubt. She also added a monitoring system, not to damage anything, but to track how her code was being used. If someone tried to modify her core algorithms without proper authentication, the system would document it, creating an unalterable record of the tampering. "Come to bed," Michael called from the bedroom at 4 a.m. "5 more minutes," Emily replied, typing the last line of code that would serve as her insurance policy. Michael was snoring when she finally crawled into bed, her laptop warm from hours of work. She looked at his sleeping face and felt nothing but resolve. They thought they were so smart, documenting her instability and planning their takeover. They had no idea what she was capable of when cornered. Emily closed her eyes and started counting down the days until January, until the charade would end, until they would learn exactly who they'd underestimated. The January countdown had begun, but Emily's mind kept circling back to earlier moments, red flags she'd dismissed, explained away, or simply refused to see. Now, with the truth burning in her chest, every memory took on a different shade. The first board meeting she wasn't invited to happened in early August. She'd been preparing her quarterly technical presentation for weeks, creating visualizations that would help their investors understand the breakthrough they'd achieved in predictive analytics. That morning, Michael stopped by her office with coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Change of plans for today's board meeting," he said, setting the cup on her desk. "Richard Blackwell wants to focus purely on financials and market expansion. Pretty dry stuff. No need for you to sit through 3 hours of number crunching." "But I always present the technical updates," Emily said, confused. "Richard specifically asked about our algorithm improvements last quarter." Michael's jaw tightened for just a second. "I'll handle it. You know how these investors get. Sometimes too much technical detail makes them nervous about things they don't understand. Better to keep it high level." Emily spent that afternoon in her office watching the clock, feeling strangely untethered. When Michael returned, he was vague about the discussions. "Went great," was all he said. "They're very pleased with our direction." 2 weeks later, Emily ran into Richard Blackwell at a coffee shop downtown. His discomfort was immediate and obvious. "Emily, how are you feeling?" he asked with the kind of careful tone people use around someone fragile. "I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be?" He shifted his weight, glancing around like he was looking for an escape route. "Michael mentioned you've been under a lot of pressure, taking some time to recalibrate." Recalibrate. The word tasted bitter. "Richard, I've never been more focused. Did Michael show you the predictive analytics breakthrough?" "He mentioned you have been working on something." His voice was cautious, diplomatic. "But he's concerned about your intensity around it. Sometimes brilliance and burnout can look very similar." Emily wanted to scream. Instead, she smiled and excused herself, leaving her untouched latte on the counter. The financial discrepancies started small. A consulting fee here, a software license there, amounts that weren't huge but didn't match any vendors Emily recognized. She found them late one night while reviewing quarterly reports, preparing for what she thought would be her next board presentation. Global Tech Consulting, 47,000. She'd never heard of them. A quick search showed a website that looked professional, but generic with no real information about their services. Integrated System Solutions, 31,500. Another ghost company with a phantom digital footprint. Emily printed everything out and confronted Michael the next morning. Why are you going through financial reports? He didn't even look up from his computer. That's not your area. I'm a 48% owner of this company. Every area is my area. He sighed, the sound of a patient parent dealing with a difficult child. These are standard business expenses. Consultants I've brought in to help with expansion strategy. Do you want to micromanage everything, or do you want to focus on what you do best? I want transparency about where our money is going, our money. He finally looked at her, his eyes cold. Interesting. When it's the code, it's your platform. When it's the finances, suddenly it's our money. The conversation spiraled into an argument that ended with him storming out. That evening, Vanessa stayed late to mediate, sitting in their conference room with her perfect posture and concerned expression. He's just stressed, she told Emily. You both are. Maybe if you focused on your technical responsibilities and let him handle the business side, things would be smoother. Looking back, Emily could see how carefully orchestrated it all was. The restructuring proposal came in September, presented as a necessary evolution for their growing company. Michael had prepared a PowerPoint presentation complete with organizational charts that showed him at the top as CEO with Emily underneath as CTO reporting directly to him. It's just formalizing what we already have, he explained to their senior staff. I handle business. Emily handles technology. This makes it clearer for investors and clients. But we're co-founders, Emily said, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her, equal partners. Of course we are. This doesn't change that. It's just about operational efficiency. Tom from sales nodded along. David from marketing seemed to think it made sense. Even her own development team stayed quiet. Emily realized then that the groundwork had been laid long before this meeting. Everyone had already been convinced this was reasonable, necessary, maybe even overdue. Vanessa had been taking notes naturally. I think what Michael's proposing makes a lot of sense, she offered, as if her opinion had been solicited. Clear hierarchies reduce confusion and improve decision-making speed. Since when do we need hierarchy between founders? Emily asked. Michael's smile was patronizing. Since we stopped being a two-person startup and became an $8 million company. The vote was scheduled for the next board meeting. Emily spent the intervening weeks trying to shore up support, but every conversation felt like pushing against a wall that had already been built. Meanwhile, Vanessa's tentacles were extending everywhere. She started joining client calls that had always been Emily's, introduced as our operations strategist, who's helping optimize client relationships. She attended the technical demos Emily conducted, taking notes and asking questions that subtly undermined Emily's explanations. When Emily says revolutionary, what she means is incrementally improved. She'd clarify to clients, her tone helpful and professional. We want to manage expectations appropriately. She began copying herself on emails between Emily and her development team just to stay in the loop. She scheduled one-on-ones with Emily's direct reports to understand their challenges better. She even started bringing coffee to their morning stand-ups, positioning herself as the caring, attentive leader, while Emily was painted as the obsessive technocrat. The isolation was the cruelest part. Sarah Park, their lead developer, who'd been with them since year one, stopped joining Emily for their usual Tuesday lunches. Just really swamped, she'd say, avoiding eye contact. Marcus, their database architect, used to bounce ideas off Emily constantly. Now he sent formal emails with Vanessa copied, requesting approval for decisions he'd previously made independently. Even the administrative staff grew distant. Conversations would halt when Emily walked into the break room. The easy camaraderie they'd built over 3 years evaporated like morning mist. One afternoon in November, Emily overheard a conversation between two junior developers who didn't know she was in the supply closet looking for printer paper. Is it true she had a breakdown in the parking garage? One asked. That's what I heard. Michael's been really patient with her, but it must be affecting the company. Vanessa said we need to be supportive, but maintain professional boundaries. Yeah, she's been great about helping us navigate the situation. The situation, that's what she'd become. Not the co-founder who'd built the platform they worked on every day, but a problem to be managed. Emily sat in that supply closet for 20 minutes, surrounded by boxes of paper and toner cartridges, understanding finally how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. Every single person in the company had been given a narrative about her, and she'd been too buried in her work, too trusting of her husband to see it happening. That night, she watched Michael at dinner cutting his steak with precise movements, checking his phone between bites. He'd gained weight recently. Too many client dinners, he said. But now she wondered if they were really client dinners or something else entirely. The team seems distant lately, she ventured. Maybe you're projecting, he replied without looking up. Have you been taking those walks Dr. Reeves recommended? Emily's blood froze. She'd never told him about Dr. Morgan. What? He glanced up, his expression neutral. You mentioned a therapist recommended exercise for stress. Had she? She couldn't remember. Maybe she had. The gaslighting was so effective that she questioned even her own memories. Right, she said, returning to her meal. The final board meeting Emily attended was in December. She wasn't presenting, Michael had made that clear. But as a major shareholder, she couldn't be excluded entirely. She sat at the far end of the conference table, watching him present her work as collaborative team efforts, while Vanessa provided supporting documentation for every claim. Richard Blackwell and the other investors barely looked at her. When she tried to add context to a technical question, Michael smoothly interrupted. Emily's absolutely right, and that's exactly what our documentation shows, he said, making her expertise sound like an echo of his own understanding. Emily left that meeting knowing her professional assassination was complete. In 2 months, she'd gone from co-founder and technical visionary to unstable liability. And the worst part, everyone believed it because the story had been told so carefully, so gradually, that it seemed like natural truth rather than constructed fiction. That night, as Michael slept beside her, she opened her laptop one more time. The code she'd been writing wasn't just insurance anymore. It was justice waiting to be served. 3 days before everything ended at 2:14 a.m. on a Monday, Emily watched their platform do something nobody thought possible. It detected an attack pattern that didn't exist yet, a future breach predicted and prevented before the hackers even launched their assault. Pacific Financial Group, their second biggest client, never knew how close they came to disaster. Their algorithm identified 17 separate vulnerability points being probed by what looked like innocent traffic. But the pattern, the beautiful, terrifying pattern, showed a coordinated attack scheduled to hit in exactly 6 hours. Emily called their head of security directly from her home office, waking him up. Tom, you need to get your team online now. You're about to be hit with a coordinated breach attempt targeting your wire transfer protocols. Emily, it's 2 a.m. What are you talking about? Check your servers, specifically the Singapore and London nodes. You'll see probe traffic that looks routine, but it's not. They're testing response times for a synchronized attack at 8:24 a.m. Eastern. The silence on the other end stretched out. Then she heard rapid typing. Jesus Christ, how did you... We're seeing it now. This is huge. Emily walked him through the countermeasures, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she helped his team shore up their defenses in real time. By 5 a.m., they'd turned their system into a fortress. When the attack came at 8:24, exactly as predicted, it bounced off like rain against steel. The call came at 9 a.m. Paul Harrison, Pacific Financial's CEO, was nearly shouting with excitement. Emily, do you understand what you just did? You saved us from what could have been $100 million loss, maybe more. This is revolutionary. The platform did what it was designed to do, she said, exhausted but exhilarated. This is why Safeguard exists. We need to set up a call with Michael and the team. This deserves recognition. Hell, this deserves a press release. Emily's stomach sank. Of course, Michael will coordinate everything. The client call was scheduled for that afternoon. Emily prepared a detailed presentation showing exactly how their algorithm had detected the future attack pattern, the predictive modeling that made it possible, and the implications for cybersecurity globally. This was Nobel Prize level innovation, and it had come from her mind, her code, her sleepless nights. Michael reviewed her presentation an hour before the call. This is a bit technical, he said, frowning at her slides. Let me simplify it for the client. She watched him delete slide after slide of her work, replacing them with vague buzzwords and corporate speak. Her groundbreaking algorithm became their proprietary threat matrix. The predictive modeling became advanced analytics. 3 years of innovation reduced to marketing fluff. When the call began, Michael positioned himself in front of the camera while Emily sat slightly off to the side, barely in frame. Paul, we're thrilled that Safeguard's platform protected Pacific Financial. Michael began, his voice smooth and confident. This is exactly the kind of result we've been working toward as the team. Incredible work, Paul responded. Emily, that call at 2 a.m., you sounded like you were watching the future. Michael jumped in before she could respond. That's the beauty of our system. It allows our entire team to monitor and respond to threats proactively. Emily was simply the one on call last night. Emily hadn't slept in 36 hours perfecting the algorithm. There was no on-call schedule. This was her life's work. Actually, she started, but Michael smoothly interrupted. What Emily's too modest to say is that this is a collaborative effort. While she handles the technical implementation, our entire team contributes to the platform's success. Vanessa, our head of operations, has been instrumental in creating the protocols that made this rapid response possible. Vanessa appeared on screen from her home office, nodding graciously. Thank you, Michael. It's really about having the right systems in place to support our technical team's brilliant work. Support. She didn't even understand how the algorithm functioned. The call continued for another 20 minutes with Michael masterfully redirecting every bit of credit away from Emily while appearing to praise her contribution. By the end, Paul Harrison probably thought she was just a coding technician following orders from visionary leadership. After the call ended, Emily sat in their empty conference room, staring at the blank screen. Her greatest professional achievement had just been stolen in real time, and she'd been powerless to stop it. That evening, she made her final preparations. Every piece of documentation that proved her authorship of Safeguard's core technology went into an encrypted cloud storage account registered under her maiden name. Patent applications she'd filed independently before the company's formation. Original code repositories with timestamp verification. Email chains from the early days when Michael freely admitted he couldn't understand her technical explanations. She also made copies of something else. The real financial records, not the sanitized versions Michael showed the board, but the raw data showing where money actually went. Global Tech Consulting, she discovered, was registered to an address that happened to be Vanessa's cousin's apartment. Integrated System Solutions traced back to a shell company in Delaware with no actual employees. They weren't just planning to steal her company. They had already been embezzling from it. Wednesday morning, Emily met with Sandra Whitfield, a divorce attorney recommended by Dr. Morgan. Her office was in Bellevue, far enough from Seattle's tech corridor that she wouldn't run into anyone she knew. Sandra was in her 60s with sharp eyes that had seen every type of marital betrayal imaginable. Washington is a community property state, she explained after reviewing Emily's documentation. Normally, that would mean a 50-50 split of assets acquired during marriage. But your husband has been very clever. The company structure shows you as a technical contractor who was granted equity, not a co-founder. Your name isn't on any of the incorporation documents. That's impossible. We founded it together. She showed Emily the paperwork. Emily's signature was there, but the documents had been altered, digitally modified to change her status from co-founder to early employee. The timestamp showed they'd been updated just 2 months ago. He's been planning this for a while, Sandra said gently. The good news is, if we can prove fraud, everything changes. But that's a long, expensive fight. How expensive? More than you'll have access to once he freezes the joint accounts, which he will do the moment you're served. Emily wrote her a check from her personal account, one Michael didn't know about, where she'd been slowly accumulating money from small consulting jobs. Start building the case, Emily told her. I'll handle the rest. That last night, Michael suggested dinner at home instead of going out. I want to cook for you, he said. And for a moment, he looked like the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd stayed up all night with her debugging code, who'd celebrated every small victory with genuine joy. He made pasta carbonara her favorite and opened a bottle of wine they'd been saving for a special occasion. They sat at their dining room table, the one they'd bought at a garage sale their first year together, and refinished themselves. Remember when we could barely afford ramen, he said, raising his glass. Look how far we've come. We've built something amazing, Emily agreed, clinking her glass against his. He reached across the table and took her hand. I know things have been tense lately, the company's growth, the stress. It's been hard on both of us. But I want you to know, Emily, you're the most brilliant person I've ever met. Past tense, no. She was imagining it. After this next quarter, let's take a vacation, he continued. Somewhere tropical. Just us. That sounds perfect. Emily lied, watching him lie to her. They did the dishes together like they used to. He washed, she dried. Their movements were synchronized from years of practice. When they were done, he pulled her close and kissed her. And for just a moment, she let herself feel the loss of what they'd had. I love you, he whispered. I know, she said because she couldn't say it back. Not anymore. That night, as Michael slept peacefully beside her, Emily lay awake running through her mental checklist. The code was in place. The documentation was secured. The lawyer was retained. Everything was ready. At 3 a.m., she slipped out of bed and walked through their house one last time. The pictures on the walls, their wedding, their first office, the day they signed their first major client. All those moments when she believed they were building something together. She made herself coffee and sat in her home office watching the sunrise through the window. In 6 hours, Michael would call her into his office. In 6 hours, her life as she knew it would end. But he didn't know about the timer on her phone. He didn't know about the code waiting to activate. He didn't know that sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who knows your systems better than you know yourself. Emily opened her laptop and typed a single command into a terminal window, scheduling it for exactly 10 minutes after 9 a.m. Then she closed the laptop, finished her coffee, and went to get ready for her last day as Michael's wife and employee. She chose the charcoal gray suit, the one she'd worn to their first investor pitch. Her hands were steady as she buttoned the jacket, applied lipstick without a tremor, and slipped on the watch Michael had given her for their 5th anniversary. Every piece of armor mattered now. The call came at exactly 9 a.m., not 8:59, not 9:01. Michael had always been precise about his cruelties. Emily, his assistant, Carol, sounded uncomfortable. Michael needs to see you in his office right away. He says it's important. I'll be right there. Emily picked up her laptop bag, the old one from their startup days with the coffee stain on the corner, and walked through the office with her head high. Developers looked up from their screens as she passed. Did they know had word already spread through the carefully constructed gossip network? The elevator ride to the executive floor felt both endless and too quick. Each floor that passed was another second closer to the performance Michael had orchestrated. When the doors opened, she saw Carol avoiding eye contact, suddenly very interested in her computer screen. Go right in, she mumbled. They're waiting. They, plural. Emily turned the handle of the door they'd installed together, the one with the slight squeak Michael had always meant to fix. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a scene staged with theatrical precision. Michael sat behind his mahogany desk, their desk, the one they'd bought at an estate sale, joking that one day they'd be successful enough to deserve it. Vanessa stood to his right, her hand resting on the back of his chair, with casual ownership. She wore a red dress, power color. Message received. But there was a third person, Gary Hughes from HR, lurking in the corner with a manila folder and the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Emily, please, sit down. Michael's voice carried that CEO tone he'd been practicing. Authoritative but detached. Emily remained standing. I'm comfortable, thanks. Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance that she wasn't following his script. Very well. He straightened a stack of papers on his desk, a nervous tell. Emily recognized from years of watching him prepare for difficult conversations. I'm afraid we need to discuss your position here at Safeguard. My position as co-founder and CTO, Vanessa shifted slightly. Gary clutched his folder tighter. Your position as an employee, Michael corrected, his tone sharp, and I'm afraid that position is being terminated. Effective immediately. The words hung in the air between them. Emily counted 3 heartbeats before responding. On what grounds? Performance issues, failure to collaborate with leadership, and creating a hostile work environment. He picked up a document, pretending to read from it. There have been multiple complaints about your erratic behavior and inability to work within the new organizational structure. Complaints from whom? That's confidential. Vanessa interjected her first words since Emily had entered. But I can assure you they've been thoroughly documented. Emily looked at her, really looked at her, the woman she'd welcomed, mentored, invited to their home for dinners. She met Emily's gaze without flinching. How long? Emily asked her directly. I'm sorry. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? Gary made a strangled sound. Michael's face flushed. That's exactly the kind of baseless accusation that exemplifies your recent behavior, Michael said coldly. You're paranoid, Emily. You see conspiracies where there are none. So Vanessa's hand on your shoulder is professional. The trips to the cabin, the late-night strategy sessions. You're embarrassing yourself, he said, but she caught the quick glance he shot at Gary. No denial. You're embarrassing yourself, but please continue with your little show. His jaw clenched. This wasn't going according to plan. She was supposed to be emotional, hysterical, giving them more ammunition for their narrative. Instead, she stood perfectly still, her phone recording everything from her jacket pocket. The decision has been made, he said, sliding a packet across the desk. Your termination is effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance continuation of health insurance for 30 days and, he paused, that cruel smile finally breaking through. You can keep your old laptop, the one from the early days. Call it sentimental value. The laptop, her 2019 MacBook Pro that contained every original line of code, every algorithm, every innovation that built this company. He thought he was being magnanimous, throwing scraps to the woman he'd destroyed. He had no idea he was handing her a loaded weapon. That's generous, she said flatly. We think so, Vanessa chimed in, considering the circumstances. The circumstances being that you're stealing my company. Nobody's stealing anything, Michael said, his voice taking on an edge of warning. You're a minority shareholder who's being removed from operational duties due to documented performance issues. Your equity remains intact, though. Of course, its value will depend on the company's continued success under new leadership. New leadership being Vanessa. The board will make that determination. The board he'd been poisoning against her for months. The board that would rubber stamp whatever he recommended. Is that everything? Amolet asked. Michael seemed surprised by her calm. He'd prepared for tears, anger, pleading. Not this cold acceptance. Not quite. His smile widened, and she saw the man behind the mask, the one who'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. There's one more matter, personal in nature. He pulled out another envelope, this one with a law firm's logo in the corner. I filed for divorce. The papers will be delivered to the house tomorrow morning. I thought it would be cleaner to handle both matters at once. Professional and personal separation. The room tilted slightly, but Emily held steady. Even expecting it, hearing the words felt like being hollowed out with a dull spoon. How efficient of you! I'm moving out tonight, he continued, as if discussing a dinner reservation. You can keep the house for now. We'll sort out the division of assets through our attorneys. Our attorneys, already separate, already divided. Anything else? Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. Gary finally spoke, his voice apologetic. Standard procedure, of course. Emily picked up the termination packet without looking at it, then reached for the laptop bag Michael had gestured to, her old computer sitting on the side table, obviously placed there for this moment. Emily, Michael said as she turned to leave. She stopped but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, you're brilliant. You always have been. But brilliance without business acumen, without the ability to play the game, it only gets you so far. She did turn then, meeting his eyes one last time. You're right, Michael. I never learned to play the game. I was too busy building the company you're about to destroy. His smirk faltered slightly. Vanessa's hand moved to his shoulder again, a gesture of support or possession. Security is waiting outside, Gary said quietly. 2 security guards stood in the hallway trying to look professional rather than uncomfortable. Emily recognized them, Tony and Marcus guys she chatted with every morning for 3 years. Morning, guys, she said pleasantly. Shall we? The walk through the office was surreal. Every face that turned toward her was a verdict. Some looked away quickly, complicit in their knowledge. Others seemed confused, watching their CTO being marched out like a criminal. A few her original team members looked stricken. Sarah half stood from her desk as Emily passed. Emily shook her head slightly, and Sarah sank back down. At her former office, she was given 10 minutes to pack. She made a show of slowly placing personal items in a box. The coffee mug from their first successful product launch, a photo of the original team, the stress ball shaped like a bug that developers had given her as a joke. She left everything important, the awards, the certificates, the framed first dollar they'd earned. Let them gather dust as monuments to what Michael had destroyed. That's everything, she told Tony, who looked like he wanted to apologize but couldn't. The elevator ride down felt like descending from a life she'd never get back. Through the lobby past the reception desk where Emma watched with wide eyes out through the glass doors she'd helped select because they represented transparency and openness. The January air hit her face sharp and clean. Behind her, the building rose into the gray Seattle sky containing everything she'd built and lost in the span of 3 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Vanessa. She deleted it without reading whatever gloating message she'd sent. Another buzz. This time her calendar notification, system maintenance, 10 minutes. She looked back at the building one more time, then walked to her car, placing the laptop bag carefully in the passenger seat. 10 minutes until the code activated. 10 minutes until they learned what happens when you steal from someone who built the very foundation you're standing on. Emily's car sat in the parking garage like a refuge, but she couldn't bring herself to get in yet. The laptop bag weighed heavy in her hand as she stood beside the driver's door, watching the digital clock on her phone tick forward. 9:08, 2 minutes. She placed the bag carefully in the passenger seat and pulled out her phone, opening an encrypted messaging app she'd installed months ago. The interface was blank except for a single status indicator, pending. 9:09, the parking garage echoed with the sound of a car door slamming somewhere above her. Normal office sounds. Normal office life continuing as if nothing had changed, as if the company's entire digital infrastructure wasn't about to reveal its true ownership. 9:10. Her phone vibrated once. The status indicator changed from pending to active. Then a cascade of automated messages began flooding a hidden partition on her device. Authentication protocol initiated. Digital signature verification active. Timestamp validation processing. Ownership registry online. Code attribution enabled. Each message represented a system coming online. Individually subtle, collectively powerful. Like lighting up a darkened house, one room at a time, revealing who truly built it. Emily finally got into her car but didn't start the engine. Instead, she drove up the garage ramp, slowly, windows down, listening. By the time she reached street level, she could already hear it. The subtle shift in the building's rhythm. A few more people than usual were visible through the ground floor windows, walking with purpose that bordered on urgency. The rain had started while she was inside that particular Seattle drizzle that couldn't decide if it wanted to be mist or actual precipitation. She pulled into a loading zone across the street, hazard lights blinking, and got out. The rain felt good on her face, washing away the sterile office air, the smell of Michael's cologne, the suffocating weight of manufactured corporate dignity. She stood on the sidewalk, tilting her face up to the gray sky, and for the first time in months, she felt free. No more pretending to be asleep when Michael crept into bed at 3 a.m. No more forcing smiles in meetings while her work was stolen. No more swallowing her voice to maintain a peace that was already shattered. Her phone buzzed again. Another status update. Authentication complete, all systems verified. Through the rain-streaked air, she could see more clearly now. The lobby, usually calm with its minimalist furniture and gentle water feature, was becoming animated. The security guard who'd been reading a newspaper was now on his phone, gesturing urgently. The receptionist was typing frantically, probably fielding calls. 9:14. A group of developers rushed past the windows, heading toward the elevator banks. Emily recognized two of them from her former team. They were practically running. Her phone showed why: attribution protocols, active author verification complete. The code wasn't destroying anything that would be illegal and unethical. It was simply revealing the truth. Every line of code now carried a digital signature, an unalterable timestamp, and a clear record of its original author. The system was methodically proving who had written what, when, and how it had been modified since. For a company whose product was security and transparency, there could be no hiding from this level of verification. 3 people burst out of the building's main entrance, phones pressed to their ears. One was Gary from HR, his folder forgotten, looking like someone had just told him the building was on fire. In a way, it was. No, no, she heard him saying into his phone. The entire client portal is claiming unauthorized modifications. They can't access anything without acknowledging the original author. The client portal, the crown jewel of their service, where Fortune 500 companies monitored their security in real time. If that was down, phone lines would be lighting up like Christmas trees. Or 16. More people were visible through the windows, now moving between floors with increasing speed. Someone dropped a stack of papers near the window, and nobody stopped to help pick them up. The careful corporate choreography was breaking down. Her phone showed a new development: external verification initiated blockchain timestamp confirmation. The system wasn't just proving Emily's authorship internally, it was connecting to external verification services that would validate timestamps and digital signatures through immutable blockchain records she'd established months ago. Records that showed she had created these algorithms long before the dates on the modified incorporation documents. A taxi pulled up beside her, the driver rolling down his window. "You okay, miss? You're getting soaked." "I'm perfect," she told him, and meant it. He shook his head and drove off, probably thinking she was crazy. Maybe she was standing in the rain watching her ex-husband's empire begin to crumble, feeling nothing but calm satisfaction. Sanity was relative. On 18, the lobby was chaos now. Emily could see Michael himself, having descended from his executive floor throne, standing near the reception desk and gesturing wildly. His perfect CEO composure was cracking. Vanessa was beside him, her red power dress looking less powerful now, more like a target. Someone actually ran across the lobby with a laptop under their arm. The elevators were constantly in motion, lights indicating every floor as teams scrambled to respond to a threat they couldn't understand. Her phone provided running commentary: ownership registry comparison complete, discrepancy found between legal documents and code attribution. That last one made Emily smile. The system had just identified that the code's documented author didn't match the company's legal records. A discrepancy that would raise immediate red flags with any technical auditor. 9 to 20. The rain had intensified, but Emily didn't move. Through the water streaming down her face, she watched two security guards rush out of the building and look around wildly as if the threat might be standing right there on the sidewalk. Their eyes passed over her without recognition. Just another pedestrian caught in the rain. Behind them, visible through the glass doors, someone had brought out a whiteboard into the lobby. They were trying to coordinate their response visually since the digital systems were becoming unreliable. It was almost quaint, like watching someone try to stop a flood with paper towels. Michael was on his phone now, pacing back and forth. Even from across the street, Emily could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept running his hand through his hair, his tell when things were spiraling beyond his control. How many times had she seen that gesture during their startup days? Except back then, she'd been the one who fixed whatever was broken. 9 to 22. A car with the Pacific Financial logo pulled up to the building faster than she'd expected. Someone inside must have called them directly. A security breach at their cybersecurity provider would be a 5-alarm fire for any financial institution. As the Pacific Financial CIO stepped out of the car, shielded from the rain by an assistant's umbrella, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She recognized the area code: Richard Blackwell, their lead investor. "What's happening at Safeguard? Rule systems showing authentication errors. Call me." She deleted it without responding. Then another buzz. External legal documentation uploaded, patent applications verified. The patents she'd filed independently before Safeguard's formation were now linked to the code, creating an unbreakable chain of legal ownership that superseded any altered corporate documents. Through the chaos, Emily spotted Sarah at her desk on the third floor, visible through the rain-washed windows. She wasn't running around like the others. She was sitting very still, staring at her screen. She knew. Maybe not the specifics, but she knew this wasn't random. Their eyes met across the distance and through the rain, and Sarah pressed her hand against the window. A goodbye, or maybe an apology for the Tuesday lunches that stopped, for the friendship that withered under corporate pressure. Emily raised her hand in response, then turned and walked back to her car. 9 to 24. As she drove away, she could see the first news van arriving in her rearview mirror. By tonight, Safeguard would be trending on every tech platform. Cybersecurity giant faces authentication crisis. The headlines would write themselves. The rain drummed against her windshield as she merged into traffic, leaving the chaos behind. Her phone continued buzzing with status updates, each one confirming that the system was working exactly as designed, not destroying, just revealing, not attacking, just uncovering truth that should never have been hidden. Everything Michael had built on the foundation of her work was being exposed, and he couldn't even call her to fix it. The irony was beautiful enough to make her laugh, a sound that surprised her with its genuineness. For the first time in months, she was actually truly laughing. The laughter died in her throat as her phone erupted with calls, not the gentle buzz of notifications anymore, actual calls, the old-fashioned kind that demanded immediate attention. The first name on the screen made her blood run cold. Richard Blackwell. Emily pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, rain still hammering the roof of her car, and stared at his name flashing on the screen. 12 rings before it went to voicemail. Immediately it started again. This time she answered. Emily, thank God. Richard's voice was strained, nothing like the composed investor who'd questioned her stability months ago. What the hell is happening over there? Our monitoring systems show Safeguard's entire infrastructure is claiming unauthorized modifications. I wouldn't know, Richard. I was terminated this morning. Silence. Then what? That's impossible. The Pacific Financial save was just 3 days ago. Ask Michael. He felt my services were no longer required. But the authentication errors, they started minutes after. He stopped, and Emily could practically hear the gears turning in his mind. Emily, please. Whatever's happening, companies are pulling out. Our portfolio is hemorrhaging value. Can you fix this? I don't work there anymore. I'm sitting in my car, locked out of all systems with no access to the platform I built. I'll pay you directly, consultant fees, whatever you want. Richard, I'm sitting in my car, locked out of all systems with no access to the platform I built. Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't. He cursed something she'd never heard from him before. This is going to destroy everything. Do you understand everything? She ended the call immediately. Another came through. Paul Harrison from Pacific Financial, the man whose company she'd saved 72 hours ago. Emily, we're pulling our contract. I'm sorry, but we can't be associated with a cybersecurity firm that can't verify its own code ownership. The board is in emergency session. This is a disaster. I understand, Paul. How could this happen? You were just... He paused. You knew this would have happened, didn't you? When you called at 2 a.m. about our vulnerabilities, you were seeing the same ownership issues in your own system. I should go, Paul. If you start your own firm, call my streets. We'll be your first client. The calls kept coming. Investors, clients, former colleagues, journalists who'd somehow gotten her number. She sent them all to voicemail, watching the messages pile up like digital snow. Then at 10:47 a.m., Michael's name appeared on the screen. She let it ring 4 times before answering. Emily, I need you to come back to the office immediately. No greeting, no pretense. His CEO voice had been replaced by something raw and desperate. I was escorted out by security. Remember? Stop playing games. The composure cracked completely. The entire system is showing ownership verification failures. We're losing everything. The code, your code, it's the only thing that can fix this. My code isn't the problem, Michael. And then what is these authentications appeared out of nowhere? The timing is unfortunate, Emily agreed. But if you'd kept the person who understood the system, maybe you'd be able to fix it. Emily, please. His voice broke on the word. I know things ended badly this morning, but this is bigger than us. The company, our company, is dying. Your company. You made that very clear. I'll bring you back. Full reinstatement. We can work out the details later. With Vanessa as my supervisor, silence. Then Vanessa is handling operations. Is she handling them well? Are her operational protocols helping with the crisis? This isn't about her. No, the head of operations has nothing to do with operational failure. She heard muffled voices in the background. Then Vanessa's voice came on the line. Emily, this is beneath you. Whatever vendetta you have against us, innocent people are being hurt. Our employees. The employees who watched me get marched out like a criminal. That was protocol. That was theater, Emily cut her off. You wanted everyone to see me humiliated. Well, now they can see you fail. Poetic, isn't it? Michael grabbed the phone back. The Securities and Exchange Commission is asking questions about our code ownership records. Do you understand what this means? It means you should have invested more in accurate documentation instead of reorganizing to push out your co-founder. I'm begging you. Those 3 words hung in the air. Michael had never begged for anything in his life. He'd charmed, persuaded, manipulated, demanded, but never begged. I can't help you, Michael. I don't have access anymore. You made sure of that. I'll give you full admin access right now. remote login, whatever you need, and contaminate the evidence. I'm sure the SEC would love that. The SEC, his voice pitched higher. They're not, you haven't notified federal regulators yet. A major ownership verification crisis at a company handling security for Fortune 500 clients, and you haven't notified the proper authorities. That's going to look interesting in the investigation. The sound he made wasn't quite a sob, but close. Emily's phone beeped with another call. Local news station. I have to go, Michael. Good luck with everything. Emily, wait. She ended the call and switched to the news station. Miss Chen, I'm calling about the situation at Safeguard. We understand you were the CTO until this morning. Can you comment on the timing of your departure and the current authentication crisis? No comment. But surely the coincidence. I said no comment. She turned her phone to silent and drove home through streets that felt different, somehow lighter. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and gleaming. Her house, soon to be just her house once the divorce went through, sat quiet and welcoming. Inside, she made herself tea and opened her personal laptop, the one Michael never knew about. The news was already everywhere. Breaking Safeguard Solutions faces major authentication crisis. Cybersecurity firm unable to verify its own code ownership. Clients flee as Safeguard fails to authenticate authorship. The tech blogs were having a field day. Someone had leaked internal communications showing the chaos, screenshots of error messages, photos of the whiteboard in the lobby, even a video of Michael shouting at someone in the parking garage. Her phone, still on silent, showed 47 missed calls. The number kept climbing. Emily opened her encrypted partition and watched the real-time feeds. The authentication protocols were working flawlessly, systematically proving her authorship of every core component of Safeguard's platform. Each verification came with timestamps, digital signatures, and blockchain validation that would stand up to the most rigorous technical and legal scrutiny. The client exodus was swift and brutal. Pacific Financial's departure triggered a domino effect. If Safeguard couldn't verify the ownership of its own code, how could it protect anyone else's data? By noon, 70% of their major contracts had termination clauses invoked. The investor situation was even worse. Richard Blackwell didn't just pull funding, he issued a public statement distancing his firm from Safeguard's fundamental authentication failures. Other investors followed suit, each statement another nail in the coffin. At 1 p.m., the SEC announcement came through. Federal authorities are investigating ownership verification issues at Seattle-based cybersecurity firm Safeguard Solutions. Companies using Safeguard services are advised to implement immediate alternative security measures. That was the kill shot. No company could survive the federal government essentially telling clients to abandon ship. Emily pulled up Safeguard's stock tracker. They'd gone public just 6 months ago, another of Michael's grand plans. The stock had opened at $47. It was now at $12 and falling. Her phone lit up with a text from Sarah. He's crying in the server room. Actually crying. Vanessa locked herself in her office. Everyone's updating their resumes. Another from a number she didn't recognize. This is Tony from security. I'm sorry about this morning. We all knew it was wrong. Michael's getting what he deserves. At 2:30, the news broke that major financial publications were running stories about cybersecurity ownership verification using Safeguard as Exhibit A. The international humiliation was complete. Emily closed her laptop and made another cup of tea. Outside, the sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting everything in that peculiar Seattle light that made the wet streets look like silver. Her phone showed 132 missed calls now. She scrolled through them. Investors, clients, media numbers she didn't recognize, and they're recurring like a desperate heartbeat. Michael. Each unanswered call was a small victory, a tiny reversal of every time he dismissed her, talked over her, stolen credit for her work. He'd wanted to erase her from the company's story. Instead, her absence was the story. The local evening news led with Safeguard. They'd found a photo of Michael from a tech conference where he'd given a speech about authentic ownership just 2 weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The question everyone's asking, the anchor said, is how a cybersecurity company could be so vulnerable to the very authentication issues it claimed to prevent. Former employees speaking on condition of anonymity report that the company's co-founder and technical architect was terminated just minutes before the verification crisis began. They showed Emily's LinkedIn photo, the professional one, where she's half smiling, looking confident and capable. Emily Chen could not be reached for comment. Oh, she couldn't. She was too busy watching an empire burn one authenticated line of code at a time. The first legal notice arrived 3 days after Safeguard's implosion made headlines. It wasn't from Michael or his attorneys, it was from the SEC requesting Emily's testimony about the company's code ownership and the modifications to the corporate documents. She forwarded it to Sandra Whitfield, who called her immediately. This is exactly what we need, the attorney said. With the SEC involved, the fraud allegations against Michael become much more credible. They'll do the heavy lifting for us. What do I need to do? Tell the truth, every bit of it, and bring all your documentation. Emily spent the next 2 days organizing her evidence. The original code repositories with timestamps, the blockchain verification records, the altered corporate documents with metadata showing recent changes, the recordings of Michael taking credit for her work, the financial records showing payments to shell companies. The SEC investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane Rodriguez, met with Emily in Sandra's office. Ms. Chen, I've been investigating securities fraud for 15 years, she said after reviewing the documentation. This is one of the most comprehensive paper trails I've ever seen. I learned to document everything, Emily replied. It's what good programmers do. The authentication system that activated you created that. Emily nodded. It doesn't damage any systems or prevent normal operations. It simply verifies authorship and timestamps. Is that legal? Diane asked. Sandra answered for her. Completely. My client didn't destroy anything or hack any systems. She merely implemented code attribution that revealed the true ownership of intellectual property. There's no law against proving you wrote something. Diane made notes. The shell companies are particularly interesting to us: global tech consulting and integrated system solutions. The money trail leads back to Vanessa Reynolds' family members. I discovered that just before I was terminated, Emily said. Ms. Reynolds is now claiming she knew nothing about the financial irregularities. Says it was all Mr. Anderson's idea. Emily wasn't surprised. They're turning on each other. Like sharks in bloody water, Diane confirmed. We've seen it before. Once these schemes start to unravel, loyalty disappears quickly. The call from Global Securities came 2 weeks after Safeguard's crisis made headlines. Emily was sitting in her home office, still in her pajamas at noon, when their CEO personally reached out. Ms. Chen, this is David Mercer from Global Securities. I'll be direct. We need someone who actually understands ownership verification, and your work at Pacific Financial speaks for itself. Are you available for consulting? Her first instinct was to say no. She needed time to process everything. But then she remembered the mortgage payment, the lawyer fees, the reality of starting over at 37. I'm listening. $5,000 a day minimum, 10-day contract, possibility of extension. We need our systems audited yesterday. She nearly dropped her coffee. That was more than she'd made in a week at Safeguard. So, when do you need me? Can you start tomorrow? That's how her freelance career began. Not with careful planning, but with desperate companies suddenly realizing their cybersecurity might have holes only she could see. Word spread quickly in Seattle's tech community. The woman who'd saved Pacific Financial was available, and everyone wanted to ensure they weren't the next Safeguard. Her second client called while she was still working on Global Securities audit. Then a third. Within 2 weeks, she had more work than she could handle and was turning down contracts. The bitter irony wasn't lost on Emily. Michael had tried to erase her professional existence, but instead he'd made her legendary. The mysterious CTO who'd left just before the catastrophe, the only one who could have prevented it. She set up a proper home office in what used to be Michael's study, removed his pretentious leather-bound books. He'd never read his awards for business excellence that now seemed like jokes, replaced them with multiple monitors, a proper server setup, and a coffee machine that could sustain her through 18-hour days. The industry publications became her guilty pleasure. Every morning with her first cup of coffee, she'd read the latest updates on Safeguard's collapse. Safeguard loses 3 more major clients. Inside the chaos, former employees described toxic leadership. From $8 million to nothing, a cautionary tale. TechCrunch ran a particularly devastating piece featuring anonymous interviews with former employees. Someone she suspected Sarah had detailed how Michael had systematically undermined his co-founder before the crisis. The comment section was brutal. Classic case of ego over expertise, one commenter wrote. You don't fire your technical architect and expect to survive in cybersecurity. The Seattle Times business section featured a timeline of Safeguard's downfall, complete with a graph showing the stock price plummeting. They'd managed to get a photo of Michael leaving the office, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years and 2 months. Gray stubble, wrinkled shirt, the hollow eyes of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. 6 weeks after the authentication crisis, Vanessa's departure made the news. Not a grand announcement, just a small item in the tech gossip section. Head of Operations, Vanessa Reynolds exits Safeguard amid ongoing crisis. Sarah texted Emily that night. You should have seen it. Michael called her a traitor in front of everyone. Said her operational incompetence had failed to prevent the authentication problems. She threw her company laptop at him. Security had to separate them. Emily felt a twist of something, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. Vanessa had thought she was special, that she was different from Emily. Now she was learning what it felt like to be discarded when things got difficult. Her LinkedIn profile disappeared entirely 2 days later. When someone tried to tag her in a post about Safeguard's failure, the link went nowhere. She had become radioactive. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a nervous process server who seemed relieved when Emily simply signed for them. Sandra reviewed them that afternoon. He's not fighting for anything, she said, seeming puzzled. The house is yours. The joint accounts get split 50-50, and he's waiving any claim to your future earnings. What about Safeguard shares? She laughed, but it wasn't happy. What shares? The company's worthless. Your 48% of nothing is still nothing. The financial statements she showed Emily were staggering. Safeguard, once valued at $8 million, was now worth less than $800,000 and falling. The office lease alone was worth more than the company's remaining assets. He's trying to sell, Sandra added. Word is he's shopping it around for pennies on the dollar, but no one's biting. Who wants a cybersecurity company known for catastrophic authentication failures? Emily's consulting business was thriving. She'd incorporated as Authentic Security Solutions, a name that felt both ironic and powerful. In 2 months, she'd made more than her annual salary at Safeguard. Companies didn't just want her expertise, they wanted the woman who'd survived the industry's most spectacular betrayal. One evening, while reviewing a contract that would take her to San Francisco for a week, she got a text from an unknown number. The message was simple. The office is empty now. They're changing the locks tomorrow. She knew it was Sarah. She also knew what she was really telling her. An era was officially over. The company they'd built, the dream they'd shared, was dead. Emily poured herself a glass of wine and stood on her deck, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere in that maze of lights was an empty office with her code still embedded in its dead systems. Somewhere was Michael, probably packing his things. Somewhere was Vanessa trying to figure out how to rebuild a career that had turned to ash. And here she was, alone but not lonely, broken but not destroyed. The consulting contracts on her desk represented a future she was building on her own terms. No co-founders, no partners, no one to betray her or steal credit for her work. The wine tasted like victory, bitter and sweet in equal measure. The doorbell rang just as she was finishing her second glass of wine. 3 months had passed since Safeguard's implosion. Emily glanced at her watch, 9:48 p.m. Far too late for a delivery. Through the peephole, she saw Michael. He looked almost unrecognizable. The polished tech CEO was gone, replaced by someone disheveled, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. His expensive suit had been replaced by jeans and a faded Stanford sweatshirt that predated their relationship. She opened the door but kept the security chain engaged, creating a narrow barrier between them. What do you want, Michael? His eyes were bloodshot, his voice raspy. They're prosecuting me, Emily. Securities fraud, embezzlement, falsifying corporate records. I'm facing real jail time. She said nothing, just watched him through the gap in the door. Can I come in? Please, I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to go. That sounds like a personal problem. I know I don't deserve your help, but please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Emily hesitated, then closed the door to unlatch the chain and reopened it. She didn't invite him in, just stepped aside. Michael shuffled past her shoulders, hunched. He stood awkwardly in the living room, looking at the changes she'd made to their once shared space. All traces of him had been methodically removed, his photographs, his favorite chair, Even the color scheme had changed from his preferred grays to warm terracottas and deep blues. "You've redecorated," he said. "Why are you here, Michael?" "It's late and I have a client meeting in the morning." He ran his hand through his hair, that old nervous gesture. "The SEC contacted me today. The prosecutor says they have enough evidence to bring multiple felony charges. They're talking 5 to 10 years. And you thought I could help. How exactly? If you'd speak to them, tell them it was all a misunderstanding." Emily's laugh cut him off. It wasn't a kind sound. "A misunderstanding? You and your girlfriend stole my company, falsified documents, embezzled funds, and had me escorted from the building like a criminal. Which part was a misunderstanding?" "I know how it looks. It doesn't look like anything. It is what it is. You committed fraud, Michael. Now you're facing the consequences." "I never meant for it to go this far." His voice cracked. "It started so small. Just a few management decisions that Vanessa said would streamline things, then restructuring the company, then the money. I didn't realize what was happening until I was in too deep to stop. You knew exactly what you were doing. I heard you planning it on that conference call with Vanessa, remember, after the new year. Clean start. By February, you'll officially be COO and we can stop sneaking around." His face went pale. "You heard that?" "I heard everything. I saw the emails. I knew weeks before you fired me. I was just waiting to see how far you'd go." "Emily, please. I lost everything. The company, my reputation. Vanessa, she's already cut a deal with the prosecution to testify against me." That made Emily pause. "She turned on you. Claimed I coerced her, that she was afraid for her job if she didn't go along with my schemes." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. The woman who suggested half the restructuring is now painting herself as an innocent bystander. "I'm supposed to feel sorry for you." "No, I don't expect that." He looked around the room again, his eyes lingering on a framed photo of Emily receiving an award at a tech conference last month, an event where she'd been the keynote speaker. I need your help. They might reduce the charges if you agreed to a statement saying you didn't intend to press fraud charges. You fired me, stole my work, took credit for my code, falsified documents to erase my role as co-founder, and now you want me to help you avoid jail? You have got to be kidding me." "I know it's a lot to ask. It's delusional is what it is." Emily moved toward the door. "I think you should leave." "Wait." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Richard Blackwell contacted me. He and some other investors have formed a consortium. They want to buy what's left of Safeguard. Good for them. I hope they get a fair price on its corpse. They want you to come back and run it." Emily froze. "What?" "They offered to buy my remaining shares. It's nothing, pennies on the dollar, but it would help with legal fees." He held out the envelope. "The deal is contingent on you agreeing to return as CTO, full creative control. They'd even rename it after you." She didn't take the envelope. "And you're bringing this to me yourself because I thought maybe if you agreed to help them revive the company, you might consider putting in a good word with the SEC. Tell them I was just in over my head, not malicious." And there it was. Not remorse, not a genuine apology, just another angle, another manipulation, another attempt to use her for his benefit. "Get out." Emily said, "Get out now, boom." He backed toward the door. "You could fix it, you know. The platform still works. With you back in charge, it could be what we always dreamed it would be." "What I dreamed it would be," she corrected. "You dreamed of taking credit for my work while sleeping with the head of operations. Now leave before I call the police." He left the envelope on the side table and walked out without another word. Emily stood in her living room, shaking with rage. After everything, he still thought he could manipulate her. Still thought she would clean up his mess. Still couldn't see her as anything but a resource to be exploited. She snatched the envelope and was about to tear it up when her phone rang. "Richard Blackwell." She stared at it for a moment and then answered. "Let me guess. Michael just left your office and came straight here with your offer." Richard's voice was apologetic. "I'm sorry, Emily. I told him not to approach you directly. This wasn't how we wanted to present the opportunity." "There is no opportunity, Richard. I'm not interested in resurrecting Safeguard. It wouldn't be Safeguard anymore. We're thinking of something like Chen's security. Your code, your vision, your name front and center. You turned against me the moment Michael suggested I was unstable. Remember, sometimes brilliance and burnout can look very similar. That's what you told me at that coffee shop. I was wrong, catastrophically wrong. I let myself be manipulated by someone I thought I could trust, and it cost me millions. But more importantly, it hurt someone who deserved better. Emily said nothing. We're not asking you to forgive anyone, Emily. We're offering you the chance to take back what was always yours, but with proper recognition and protection this time. Michael seems to think this offer comes with strings attached, that I'm supposed to help him with the SEC. Michael is delusional. We made no such deal. In fact, our legal team is cooperating fully with the investigation. Whatever happens to him happens regardless of your decision. She glanced at the envelope on the table. I'll think about it. That's all we're asking. And Emily, I'm truly sorry for not seeing what was happening. I should have listened to you, not him. After hanging up, Emily picked up the envelope but didn't open it. She walked back out to her deck, staring at the Seattle skyline as she turned the offer over in her mind. It was tempting a chance to reclaim the platform she'd built to finally get the recognition she deserved. But it would also mean stepping back into a world that had already betrayed her once. Could she trust Richard and his consortium more than she'd trusted Michael? Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Is it true Richard's group wants to bring you back? Please say yes. The platform needs you. I need you. We can rebuild it the right way this time. Sarah, who'd stayed loyal even when it was hard. Sarah, who'd clearly been feeding information to the press about what really happened. Sarah, who still believed in the technology they'd created together. Maybe that was worth something. Emily opened the envelope and read through the offer. It was generous, more than generous. Full creative control, majority equity stake, her name on the building, a board seat, a salary that made her consulting fees look small. But it wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about recognition, about truth, about ownership, and maybe, just maybe, about redemption. Not for Michael, never for him, but for the platform itself. For the vision she'd had when she first wrote those lines of code in their tiny apartment years ago. A prediction engine that could see attacks before they happened. A system that could protect people before they even knew they were in danger. She picked up her phone and texted Sarah back. Tell Richard I'll meet with him tomorrow, but the company name will be Chen Verified Security. Nothing else. The response came back almost immediately. Yes. Can I come to the meeting too? I have so many ideas for the platform rebuild. Emily smiled. Of course, you're my lead developer now. She put her phone down and looked out at the city lights one more time. Tomorrow she'd start building something new from the ruins of what Michael had destroyed. Tomorrow she'd reclaim her work and her vision. Tonight, though, she would finish her wine and savor the moment. The moment when Emily Chen stopped being the woman who lost everything and became the woman who took it all back with interest. The wine still tasted like victory, but now it was pure sweetness, no bitterness at all. 2 days after agreeing to meet with Richard, Emily walked into the Pacific Financial headquarters with Sarah beside her. The receptionist recognized them immediately. Ms. Chen, Mr. Blackwell's team is waiting for you in the executive conference room. As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Sarah couldn't contain her excitement. They've assembled a dream team, Emily. The best developers from 4 companies all waiting for your direction. And the funding is solid $9 million to start. Emily remained calm, but inside a flame of excitement was growing. This wasn't a resurrection of Safeguard. This was something entirely new. The conference room fell silent when she entered. Richard Blackwell stood at the head of the table, surrounded by representatives from 5 major financial institutions, all former Safeguard clients who jumped ship during the crisis. Emily, Richard said, stepping forward to shake her hand, thank you for coming. She nodded, taking in the room. I understand you want to build something new from the ashes of Safeguard. Not from the ashes, corrected the woman from Global Securities. From its foundation. Your foundation. We've reviewed the authentication system you implemented, said a man Emily recognized as the CTO of Pacific Financial. Brilliant work. That kind of ownership verification has applications far beyond what Safeguard was doing. For the next 2 hours, they discussed vision, structure, and timeline. No one interrupted Emily when she spoke. No one tried to simplify her technical explanations. No one suggested that someone else should present her ideas. When the meeting concluded, Richard handed her a revised contract. We've incorporated all the changes you requested. Full creative control, your name on the building, majority ownership, and a public acknowledgement that you were the original architect of the core technology. Emily reviewed the document carefully, then signed it. When do we start? How about right now? Richard gestured to the window. She looked out to see a building across the street with a temporary banner being unfurled, future home of Chen Verified Security. As she stared at her name in giant letters, she felt Sarah's hand on her shoulder. You did it, Emily. You won. We're just getting started, Emily replied, but she couldn't suppress her smile. 3 days later, as Emily was setting up her new office, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Chen, this is Warden Roberts from King County Correctional Facility. I have an inmate who's requested to speak with you. Michael Anderson. Emily's hand tightened around the phone. What does he want? He didn't say. You're under no obligation to accept the call. She hesitated, then said, put him through. A pause, then Michael's voice hollow and defeated. Emily. What do you want, Michael? I'm busy. I heard about the new company, Chen Verified Security. And I just wanted to say congratulations. I always knew you were the real genius behind everything we built. Is that all? He sighed. No, I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because I got caught, not because I'm sitting in this cell, but because I hurt the one person who always believed in me, who made everything possible. Emily said nothing, waiting to see if this was another manipulation. I'll be transferred to federal prison next week. 5 years, part of a plea deal. His voice cracked. I didn't want that to happen without telling you I know what I did, and I'm paying for it now. Yes, you are. Richard showed me the new company logo, your signature integrated into the design. It's perfect. It's what I should have done from the beginning, put your name front and center where it belonged. Emily felt a strange sense of closure hearing the defeat in his voice. Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye, Emily, and thank you for taking my call. She hung up and turned back to her computer. On the screen was the new platform she was designing, a complete rebuild of the prediction engine, but better, stronger, more accurate. A notification popped up on her screen. Sarah had just committed new code to the repository with a comment, building on Emily's foundation with proper attribution this time. Emily smiled and continued working. Sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who builds everything back better after you tear it down. And sometimes justice doesn't just come from courts or trials or prison sentences. Sometimes justice is seeing your name on a building, your code running exactly as you designed it, and your vision finally properly acknowledged. Justice is reclaiming your power and using it to build something extraordinary. The Seattle morning dawned crisp and clear, a rarity in January. Emily stood in front of the building that would house Chen Verified Security, watching workers install the new sign. Her name, prominently displayed in sleek modern lettering, gleamed in the winter sunlight. Quite a view, isn't it? Sarah joined her on the sidewalk, 2 coffee cups in hand. She passed one to Emily. Your name 20 feet tall. Emily accepted the coffee, her eyes still fixed on the sign. Not just my name, our future. 3 weeks had passed since she'd signed the agreement with Richard Blackwell and his investment consortium. In that time, she'd assembled a core team of 25 engineers with Sarah as her lead developer. They'd secured a 5-year lease on the building, ironically just 2 blocks from Safeguard's now empty offices, and begun the painstaking process of rebuilding her platform from the ground up. The servers arrived this afternoon, Sarah said, sipping her coffee. And I've finished interviewing the last of the security specialists. Found an amazing woman from MIT, reminds me of you 5 years ago. Hire her, Emily said without hesitation, and make sure her contract specifies clear attribution for any code she develops. Sarah nodded. Already done. Every developer contract now has the Chen clause, full attribution rights, protected by blockchain verification. Emily smiled at the name. The Chen clause had been Sarah's idea, a legally binding addition to every employment contract that ensured all code would be properly attributed to its creator. No one at Chen Verified Security would ever suffer what Emily had experienced. I need to show you something, Sarah said, pulling out her tablet. I found this while we were migrating the old Safeguard codebase. She pulled up a file dated nearly 3 years ago, one of the earliest versions of the prediction algorithm Emily had created in their apartment. Look at the comments. Emily scrolled through the code, her eyes widening as she read her own words from years ago. Dream bigger, Em. This isn't just about security. This is about truth, about proving what's real, about making sure no one can ever take credit for someone else's work again. She'd written those comments at 3 a.m., running on caffeine and inspiration, a personal note that she'd forgotten about entirely. You knew even then, Sarah said softly. You built a solution to your own problem before the problem even existed. Emily handed the tablet back, a strange feeling washing over her. Had some part of her always known this would happen? Had she subconsciously prepared for Michael's betrayal years before it occurred? I guess I've always valued the truth, she said finally, even when it hurts. They walked together into the building where the rest of the team was already at work. Developers hunched over keyboards, whiteboards covered in diagrams and flow charts, conference rooms filled with animated discussions. This was how Safeguard had looked in its early days, vibrant, passionate, collaborative. Emily's office was on the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. Unlike Michael's old executive suite, she designed it to be open and accessible. Glass walls, no imposing desk, comfortable seating arranged in a conversational circle. The only personal touch was a framed piece of code on the wall, the authentication system that had brought Safeguard to its knees and given birth to Chen-verified security. Richard Blackwell was waiting for her, examining the framed code with interest. I still can't believe how elegant it is, he said as she entered. 300 lines of code that destroyed an $8 million company. It didn't destroy anything, Emily corrected. It simply revealed the truth. Richard nodded, turning to face her. The SEC called me this morning. Michael's plea deal is finalized. 5 years in a minimum security facility, plus restitution to investors. Emily set her coffee down. And Vanessa? 18 months, mostly probation. She cooperated extensively, provided all the evidence they needed against Michael. He hesitated. She's also agreed to testify in your civil suit if needed. I'm not pursuing a civil suit. Richard raised an eyebrow, and after everything they did, what would be the point? Michael's in prison. Vanessa's career is over. Safeguard is dead. And I have this. She gestured to the space around them. Moving forward seems more productive than looking back. That's remarkably generous of you, Emily laughed. It's not generosity, Richard. It's efficiency. I have better things to do with my time than drag out legal proceedings against people who've already lost everything. Richard smiled, clearly relieved. As the primary investor in both Safeguard and now Chen-verified security, extended litigation would have been messy for him too. In that case, I have good news. Pacific Financial is ready to sign a 3-year contract. Twice what they were paying Safeguard. They want the new prediction engine installed by the end of next month. We'll be ready, Emily said confidently. Sarah's team already has the core architecture mapped out. More robust, more accurate, and with improved attribution, verification built into every module. That's the other thing I wanted to discuss. This attribution verification system you've developed, it has applications far beyond cybersecurity. Financial services, creative industries, academic research, anywhere original work needs to be protected and verified. Emily had been thinking the same thing. It started as a way to prove I wrote the code, but it could become a standard for digital authentication across multiple industries. Exactly. I've already had calls from 3 different venture capital firms interested in licensing just that component. They see it as a potential industry standard. She considered this. The authentication system had been born from pain and betrayal, designed as protection against theft. But Richard was right, it could be much more. A way to ensure that creators of all kinds receive proper credit for their work. A shield against the Michael Andersons of the world. Let's develop it as a separate product line, she decided. Chen verification protocol. Sarah can lead a dedicated team, but we maintain control of the core technology. Richard nodded, clearly pleased. I'll set up the meetings, and Emily, thank you for giving this a second chance. Most people would have walked away. After he left, Emily stood at the window looking out at the city. 3 months ago, she'd watched her life's work crumble from a similar window. Now she was building something new from those ruins, something better, stronger, more authentic. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Lauren Morgan. Saw your new building, impressive. How are you feeling about everything? Emily considered the question. How was she feeling? There was satisfaction, certainly. Vindication, pride in what she was creating, but also a lingering caution. Trust wouldn't come easily again. Building something new, she texted back. One authenticated line of code at a time. The response came quickly. That's the Emily I know. Still up for coffee next Tuesday. Wouldn't miss it. Emily put down her phone and turned back to her computer. The new prediction engine was taking shape, incorporating everything she'd learned from Safeguard's successes and failures. But more importantly, it reflected her original vision, a system that could see threats before they materialized, that could protect people before they even knew they were in danger. A system built on truth, transparency, and proper attribution. A system with her name on it. 6 weeks later, Chen Verified Security launched its first product, the Predictive Defense Platform. The launch event was held at the Four Seasons with representatives from major financial institutions, tech companies, and cybersecurity firms in attendance. Emily stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. Sarah sat in the front row along with the core development team. Richard and his investor group occupied a table near the stage. Journalists from tech publications filled the back of the room, recording devices ready. 3 years ago, Emily began, I wrote the first lines of code for what would become a revolutionary approach to cybersecurity. An algorithm that could predict attacks before they happen, that could see patterns emerging before they became threats. She paused, remembering those early days in the cramped apartment with Michael, the excitement of building something together. The memory no longer stung as sharply. That code grew into a platform that protected billions of dollars in assets for dozens of companies. But somewhere along the way, something important was lost, the truth about who created it, who maintained it, who improved it, day after day, line after line. The room was silent now, everyone aware of the Safeguard implosion that had made headlines months earlier. Chen Verified Security was born from that lesson. We believe that attribution matters, that transparency isn't just a buzzword, it's the foundation of trust. Every line of code in our platform carries a digital signature that proves who wrote it, when, and how it's been modified since. Nothing can be hidden, erased, or stolen. She clicked the remote in her hand, and the screen behind her displayed the platform's interface, sleek, intuitive, powerful. The Predictive Defense Platform doesn't just protect you from external threats. It protects the very truth of its own creation. In a digital world where anything can be copied, altered, or falsified, we offer something revolutionary: certainty. On the demonstration that followed showed the platform in action, identifying potential attack vectors, predicting emerging threats, and securing vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. But more importantly, it showed the attribution system, how every module, function, and feature was verifiably linked to its creator. When Emily finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Questions from the audience showed they understood the dual value proposition: cutting-edge security combined with unassailable authentication. Ms. Chen, one journalist asked, some might say this authentication system was born from your personal experience at Safeguard. Do you see it as vindication? Emily considered her answer carefully. I see it as evolution. Every innovation comes from somewhere, often from pain or necessity. The authentication system was my response to a specific problem, but its applications extend far beyond my personal experience. It's not about vindication. It's about building something better. And what about Michael Anderson? Have you spoken to him since his sentencing? The room went quiet. It was the question everyone had been wondering, but few had dared to ask. My focus is on Chen Verified Security and the amazing team we're building, Emily replied evenly. The past is the past. After the presentation, as attendees mingled over drinks and hors d'oeuvres, a woman approached Emily. Early 60s, elegantly dressed with a shrewd gaze that seemed to evaluate everything it landed on. Ms. Chen, Catherine Lawson, Vertex Investments. She handed Emily a business card. Impressive presentation, particularly the authentication protocol. Thank you. We're quite proud of it. You should be. I've been in tech investment for 30 years, and it's rare to see something with such broad applications emerge from what was essentially a personal defense mechanism. Emily raised an eyebrow. You've done your homework. Catherine smiled. I never invest without understanding the full story. And yours is quite remarkable. The betrayed co-founder who brought down an empire with her code, then built something better from the ruins. If you're looking for drama, Ms. Lawson, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. We're a cybersecurity company, not a revenge story. On the contrary, I'm looking for innovation born from authentic experience, and you have that in spades. She took a sip of her champagne. Vertex is interested in leading your Series A funding round, 20 million with minimal dilution of your equity. Emily blinked, caught off guard. Richard had mentioned potential investors, but nothing of this magnitude. That's a substantial offer. For a substantial opportunity, the authentication protocol alone could become the industry standard for digital verification. But I'm not interested in just the technology. I'm interested in you, Ms. Chen. Mr. Maitum. Leaders who have been through fire and emerged stronger are rare in this industry. Too many success stories are built on privileged connections and smooth paths. You've faced betrayal, fought back, and created something revolutionary in the process. That's the kind of founder I want to back. Emily studied Catherine more carefully. Unlike most investors she'd met who focused solely on growth metrics and market penetration, Catherine seemed genuinely interested in the human element, the story behind the code. I'd need to discuss this with my team and current investors. We have a specific vision for the company's growth. Of course, and I'd expect nothing less. But consider this: with Vertex's backing, you could accelerate the development of the authentication protocol as a standalone product. Make it the standard for digital verification across multiple industries. It was an enticing vision, one that aligned with Emily's own ambitions for the technology. But she'd learned to be cautious about promises that seemed too good to be true. "I'll review your proposal," she said, taking the folder Catherine offered, "and we can discuss specifics later this week." As Catherine walked away, Sarah appeared at Emily's side. "Was that Catherine Lawson, the Catherine Lawson? You know her?" "Of her. Vertex is legendary for picking winners early. They backed 3 unicorns in their pre-revenue stages, but they're also known for being extremely selective." Emily glanced at the folder in her hand. "She wants to lead our Series A, 20 million. Sarah's eyes widened. "That's... holy shit, Emily." "I know, it seems almost too perfect." Sarah gave her a knowing look. "You're suspicious." "Cautious," Emily corrected. "Large investments come with strings attached. I want to know what those are before we commit to anything." "Smart, but also maybe consider that sometimes good things happen because you deserve them, because you built something valuable that people want to invest in." Emily smiled wryly. "I'll try to remember that." Later that evening, as the event wound down, Emily found herself alone with Richard at the bar. "Quite a successful launch," he said, signaling the bartender for another scotch. "3 contracts, signed on the spot, and I saw you talking with Catherine Lawson. She doesn't attend launches unless she's serious about investing. She made a preliminary offer, 20 million for the Series A." Richard's eyebrows shot up. "That's aggressive even for Vertex. Must have really impressed her." "I'm not sure if it's the technology she's interested in or the story behind it." "Does it matter? 20 million is 20 million. Emily swirled her drink thoughtfully. "It matters to me. I don't want Chen to be defined by what happened at Safeguard. I want it to stand on its own merits." "Emily," Richard said gently, "what happened at Safeguard is part of your story. It's what led you here. You can't separate the two entirely, nor should you try. It's what makes you and your company unique. Maybe, but I won't let it become a marketing angle. Invest in the wronged founder who got revenge. That's not what Chen Verified Security is about." "What is it about then?" Emily looked out at the room, at the team she'd assembled, at the technology they were building together. "It's about doing it right this time. About building something that respects the contributions of everyone involved. About creating technology that serves truth rather than ego." Richard nodded slowly. "Then make that clear to Catherine. Set the terms from the beginning. You're in a position of strength, now use it." Emily considered his advice. He was right. She wasn't the desperate, betrayed co-founder anymore. She was the CEO of a promising startup with groundbreaking technology and strong initial contracts. She could negotiate from a position of power. "I will," she decided. "But first I need to understand exactly what Vertex wants from this investment." 3 days later, Emily sat in Catherine Lawson's office on the 42nd floor of a downtown high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Puget Sound, the water glittering in the afternoon sun. "Thank you for meeting with me," Catherine said, gesturing to a sleek conference table rather than sitting behind her desk. "I hope you've had time to review our proposal." "I have," Emily replied, taking a seat. "It's generous, but I have some questions about Vertex's expectations." "Of course. What would you like to know? Why us? Why now? You could invest in dozens of promising security startups. Why focus on Chen-verified security when we've barely launched our first product?" Catherine leaned back, considering her answer. "Three reasons. First, the technology. The authentication protocol is genuinely revolutionary. It solves a problem most people don't even realize they have until it's too late. Second, the timing. Digital verification is becoming crucial across industries as deepfakes and AI-generated content proliferate. And third, yes, you. Me specifically, or just the founder's story? Both. Your technical expertise is unquestionable, but it's your resilience that interests me most. The tech industry is littered with brilliant founders who collapse at the first sign of adversity. You've already weathered a storm that would have destroyed most people and emerged stronger for it. Emily nodded, appreciating the candor. "And what does Vertex want in return? Besides equity and the standard board seat, we want first right of refusal on the authentication protocol's expansion into non-security markets. We see applications in media authentication, academic publishing, creative industries, anywhere original work needs verification. We believe that product line could ultimately be more valuable than the security platform itself." It wasn't an unreasonable request, and it aligned with Emily's own vision for the technology's broader applications. "One more question. Would you expect us to leverage the safeguard story in our marketing?" Catherine frowned slightly. "Absolutely not. In fact, I'd advise against it. The technology should speak for itself. The safeguard connection is relevant to investors who need to understand your background, but it shouldn't be the focus of your public narrative." Emily felt some of her tension ease. This was the answer she'd hoped for. "In that case, I think we can work together. But I have two non-negotiable conditions. First, I maintain majority control of the company, regardless of future funding rounds. And second, every employee receives attribution rights for their work protected by both contract and technology." Catherine didn't hesitate. "Agreed on both counts. Founder control is actually preferred in our investment model. We've found that companies perform better when visionary founders remain at the helm, and the attribution rights align perfectly with your core value proposition." They shook hands, and Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This partnership felt right in a way that her collaboration with Michael never had: clear, transparent, with mutual respect rather than manipulation. As she left Vertex's offices and headed back to Chen Verified Security, her phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made her stop in the middle of the sidewalk. "Request for meeting, Pacific State Correctional Facility." The email was brief and formal. "Dear Ms. Chen, inmate Michael Anderson ID 872391 has requested a visitation meeting with you. As per facility protocol, we are contacting you to determine if you are willing to be added to his approved visitors list. Please respond with your decision at your earliest convenience. Regards, Visitor Services, Pacific State Correctional Facility." Emily stared at the screen, conflicting emotions washing over her. The last time she'd spoken to Michael was that phone call from jail, where he'd offered a half-hearted apology while still trying to manipulate her into helping with his case. What could he possibly want now? A real apology? Forgiveness? Some kind of closure? Or was it just another attempt to use her in some way? She put her phone away without responding and continued walking. She'd deal with it later. Right now, Chen Verified Security needed her focus. They were on the verge of a major funding round with contracts to fulfill and a team to lead. Michael Anderson belonged to her past, not her future. Back at the office, Sarah was waiting with news of her own. The Chen verification protocol just passed its final stress test, she announced excitedly. "We're ready for beta deployment across all client systems." "That's ahead of schedule," Emily said, pleasantly surprised. "The teams have been working around the clock. They're as invested in this as we are." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "There's something else. I got a call from Vanessa Reynolds." Emily froze. What did she want? To apologize, supposedly, and to see if we were hiring. You're kidding. Wish I was. I told her we had no openings that matched her qualifications. Emily shook her head in disbelief. The audacity. That's what I thought. But then she started crying, talking about how she can't get hired anywhere, how her name is toxic in the industry now. It was uncomfortable. Emily felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction that Vanessa was facing consequences, but also an unexpected twinge of empathy. She remembered all too well what it felt like to have doors closed in her face, to be suddenly persona non grata in the industry you'd built your life around. What did you tell her? That actions have consequences. That while I personally might someday forgive her professionally, we could never trust her. And that she should probably look outside the tech industry for her next opportunity. It was exactly what Emily would have said herself. Thank you for handling that. I don't think I could have been that measured. You would have been. You're not vindictive, Emily. Protective, yes. Cautious, definitely. But not cruel. Emily wasn't so sure. There was a part of her that took satisfaction in knowing both Michael and Vanessa were suffering the consequences of their actions. But Sarah was right about one thing: she wasn't cruel. She wouldn't go out of her way to make their lives worse. She simply wanted nothing to do with either of them, which brought her back to Michael's visitation request. Why was she even considering it? What possible benefit could come from seeing him? Earth to Emily, Sarah waved a hand in front of her face. You disappeared on me for a minute there. Sorry, just thinking about something. She refocused on the present. Show me the stress test results for the protocol. I want to see the performance metrics. For the next few hours, Emily immersed herself in work, reviewing data, approving design changes, and planning the beta deployment. This was where she belonged, building something meaningful with people she trusted. But as the office emptied that evening, Michael's request lingered in her mind. She sat alone in her office, the Seattle skyline gradually lighting up as dusk fell, and finally reopened the email. Her finger hovered over the reply button. What would Dr. Morgan advise? Probably that closure could be valuable, but only if approached with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed a brief response. I will agree to a single meeting. Please advise on available times and visitor protocols. She hit send before she could reconsider, then sat back wondering if she'd just made a huge mistake. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. The funding agreement with Vertex was finalized, with the first tranche of investment scheduled for transfer the following month. The beta deployment of the Chen verification protocol began across their initial client base with promising early results. Emily hired 5 more developers to focus specifically on expanding the protocol's applications beyond security. Through it all, she tried not to think about the upcoming prison visit. She'd received a confirmation email with a scheduled time, Tuesday 4 p.m., and detailed instructions about visitor protocols. She hadn't told anyone, not even Sarah or Dr. Morgan. This was something she needed to do alone for reasons she couldn't fully articulate even to herself. Tuesday arrived cold and gray, with a persistent drizzle that matched Emily's mood. She'd chosen to dress simply: dark jeans, a navy sweater, minimal makeup. Nothing that suggested she was trying to impress or intimidate. Nothing that would give Michael any insights into her new life. Pacific State Correctional Facility was a 2-hour drive from Seattle, a low-slung complex of beige buildings surrounded by multiple layers of security fencing. Emily parked in the visitor lot, noting the mix of vehicles: modest sedans, aging minivans, a few work trucks. The families of inmates making the pilgrimage to maintain connections across the barrier of incarceration. She didn't belong here. She wasn't family. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't even sure why she'd come, except that something in her needed to see this through to its conclusion. The check-in process was lengthy and impersonal. Eye verification, metal detectors, pat-downs, a litany of rules recited in a monotone by guards who'd said the same words thousands of times. No personal items beyond a single car key. No gifts, food, or money. 30 minutes maximum. No physical contact beyond a brief greeting handshake. Emily was led to a room with 24 small tables, each with chairs on opposite sides. Some tables were already occupied inmates in beige uniforms facing visitors in civilian clothes. Hushed conversations, awkward laughter, a few tears. The heavy atmosphere of lives interrupted, relationships strained across the divide of incarceration. She was assigned to table 14 and told to wait. 5 minutes later, a door at the far end opened, and Michael appeared, escorted by a guard. He'd lost weight. His formerly styled hair was cut short utilitarian. The designer clothes replaced by a shapeless uniform that hung on his frame. But the most striking change was in his eyes. The confident gleam was gone, replaced by a wary, subdued look she'd never seen before. The guard led him to the table and stepped back, maintaining a watchful distance. "Emily," Michael's voice was rough as if from disuse. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," she replied honestly. He nodded, accepting this. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Why did you ask me to come, Michael? What could you possibly have to say that couldn't be said in a letter?" "Or not at all." He looked down at his hands resting on the table. She noticed they were dry and chapped, the manicured nails of the polished CEO replaced by the rough hands of a prisoner. "I needed to see you in person, to make sure you heard this directly from me, not through a letter that you might throw away or an email you might delete." He took a deep breath. "I am sorry, Emily. Truly deeply sorry for everything I did to you." She said nothing, waiting for the manipulation that usually followed his apologies. "I know that doesn't change anything," he continued. "I know it doesn't undo the pain I caused or the trust I betrayed. But I needed you to hear it face to face, with no agenda and nothing to gain. Just the truth for once." Emily studied him, looking for signs of the old Michael, the calculating charm, the subtle manipulation. But all she saw was exhaustion and regret. "Why now? It's been months." "Because prison gives you a lot of time to think, to really see yourself clearly, maybe for the first time." He ran a hand over the short hair, a shadow of his old nervous gesture. "I've been meeting with a therapist here, trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I threw away everything good in my life for, what, money, power, Vanessa. Did you find your answers?" "Some of them. None that excuse what I did." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I was insecure, terrified that people would realize you were the real genius behind Safeguard, that I was just window dressing. So I tried to make myself indispensable by controlling everything: the business side, the investor relationships, the company narrative. And when that wasn't enough, I tried to erase your contributions entirely." It was the most honest she'd ever heard him sound, the most self-aware. "I saw your new company in the news," he continued. "Chen Verified Security. It's exactly what Safeguard should have been. What it could have been if I hadn't let my ego destroy everything we built." "It's what Safeguard was always meant to be," Emily corrected. "A platform built on truth and proper attribution. The vision was always there. You just couldn't see it." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "You're right. I couldn't see past my own insecurities, and I lost everything because of it." He hesitated. "I didn't ask you here to seek forgiveness, Emily. I don't deserve that, and I know it. I needed you to know that I understand what I did, that I take full responsibility, that not a day goes by that I don't regret betraying the one person who always believed in me even when I didn't deserve it." Emily felt a strange sense of peace washing over her. This was what she'd come for, though she hadn't realized it until this moment. Not to gloat over his downfall, not to extract more apologies, but to see with her own eyes that he truly understood the magnitude of what he'd done. "Thank you for telling me that," she said quietly. "I appreciate your honesty." "It's about 4 years too late," he said with a sad smile. "But better late than never, I guess." "What will you do when you get out?" He shrugged. "I'll never work in tech again. That's certain. My parents offered to help me start over in Columbus. Maybe a small business, something completely different. Landscaping, maybe. My dad always said I had a good eye for design." The image was so at odds with the ambitious CEO she'd known that Emily almost laughed. But there was something touching about it, too. A humbled Michael starting over from scratch, doing honest work with his hands. "I think you'll be good at it," she said, and meant it. "You always did have an eye for how things should look." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. The dreams they'd built together, the betrayal that tore them apart, the separate paths they now walked. "Time's almost up," the guard announced from behind Michael. Emily nodded, suddenly feeling the finality of the moment. This was goodbye in the truest sense. Not the angry separation of their divorce, not the chaotic aftermath of Safeguard's collapse, but a conscious closing of a chapter. "I should go," she said, standing. Michael stood too, his movements constrained by the watchful presence of the guard. Emily, he said, his voice catching slightly. One last thing. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but be careful with Richard Blackwell. He's not as straightforward as he seems. She frowned. What do you mean? Just watch your back and read the fine print on anything he's involved in. That's all I can say. Before she could press for details, the guard stepped forward. Visiting time is over. Emily nodded, processing Michael's warning. Was it a genuine concern or just a final attempt to sow discord? Goodbye, Michael, she said simply. Goodbye, Emily, and good luck with everything. You've built something remarkable. Don't let anyone take it from you this time. As she walked out through the series of security checkpoints, Emily felt lighter somehow. Not because she'd forgiven Michael, she wasn't sure she ever would completely, but because she'd seen him clearly, perhaps for the first time. Not the charming entrepreneur who'd swept her off her feet. Not the manipulative betrayer who'd stolen her company. Just a flawed, insecure man facing the consequences of his actions. And in seeing him clearly, she could finally begin to let go of the anger that had been fueling her for so long. The anger that, while justified, had been taking up space she needed for other things. For building, for creating, for moving forward. But Michael's parting warning about Richard lingered an unwelcome seed of doubt. She'd been careful with the Vertex investment, ensured her control remained absolute. But had she missed something with Richard himself as she drove back to Seattle through the rain? Emily made a mental note to review all her agreements with Richard, not out of paranoia, but out of the hard-earned wisdom that trust should always be verified. 2 days after her prison visit, Emily sat in a conference room with Sarah and their legal team reviewing the final contract for the Chen Verification Protocol's first major licensing deal. Global Media Solutions, one of the largest news organizations in the world, wanted to implement the protocol to authenticate their content against deepfakes and unauthorized modifications. This is a watershed moment, Emily's lead counsel explained. Once global media adopts the protocol, other news organizations will follow. It could become the industry standard within a year. Emily nodded pleased, but also focused on the details. And the attribution requirements. Fully intact, Sarah confirmed. They can license the technology, but they can't modify it without proper attribution tracking. And any improvements they develop get shared back to the core protocol with full credit to their developers. Perfect. Emily signed the contract, then slid it across the table to the global media representative. Welcome to the attribution revolution. After the meeting concluded, Emily asked Sarah to stay behind. I need to ask you something, she said once they were alone, about Richard Blackwell. Have you noticed anything concerning in his involvement with the company? Anything that seemed off? Sarah looked surprised. No, nothing specific. He's been supportive, mostly hands-off. Why did something happen? Emily hesitated, unsure how much to share about her prison visit. Just something that made me wonder if we should take a closer look at our agreements with him. Sarah studied her friend's face. This isn't like you, Em. You've been meticulous about every contract, every agreement. If there was something to find, you would have found it already. Probably, Emily agreed, but it can't hurt to double-check. Does this have anything to do with your mysterious absence on Tuesday? You were unreachable for nearly 5 hours. Emily sighed. She should have known Sarah would notice. I went to see Michael. Sarah's eyes widened. At the prison? Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to do it alone. To find some kind of closure, I guess. And did you find closure? Emily considered the question. I think so. He seemed genuinely remorseful. Different. Prison will do that to you, Sarah said dryly. Was he the one who raised concerns about Richard? He suggested I should be careful. Said Richard isn't as straightforward as he seems. Sarah snorted. Of course he did. Classic Michael, trying to plant doubts, create division, even from behind bars. That's what I thought too, Emily admitted. But what if he's right? What if I've missed something important? Then we'll deal with it, Sarah said firmly. Together, like we deal with everything else. But Emily, you can't let Michael's words, even his warnings, control your actions anymore. That's still giving him power over you. Emily knew Sarah was right. She was allowing Michael's parting comment to burrow under her skin to make her question relationships that had so far been nothing but positive. You're right, she conceded, but I'm still going to review those agreements. Of course you are, Sarah said with a smile. You wouldn't be Emily Chen if you didn't verify everything personally. Later that afternoon, Emily sat in her office methodically reviewing every document, contract, and agreement involving Richard Blackwell and his investment group. From the initial funding of Safeguard through to the latest Vertex arrangement, she examined every clause, every condition, every potential trap. She found nothing alarming. The Safeguard agreements had standard terms for venture capital investment board seats, information rights, liquidation preferences, nothing that would have allowed Richard to take control of the company without Michael's active participation in the fraud. The Chen-verified security agreements were even more founder-friendly, with explicit protections for Emily's control and clear attribution requirements for all intellectual property. If Richard had ulterior motives, they weren't reflected in the legal paperwork. Emily was about to conclude that Michael's warning had indeed been a final attempt at manipulation when her phone rang. Catherine Lawson from Vertex. Emily, do you have a moment? Something's come up that you should be aware of. Of course. What is it? We've been conducting our standard due diligence on all parties involved in the investment round. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. And we found something concerning regarding Richard Blackwell. He appears to be in discussions to sell his stake in Chen-verified security to Astra Dynamics. Emily frowned. Astra Dynamics? The defense contractor. The same, they've been aggressively acquiring cybersecurity assets for the past year, particularly those with prediction capabilities. And they're not known for maintaining founder control once they get involved. Emily felt a chill. Michael's warning suddenly seemed less like manipulation and more like a genuine attempt to protect her. Can he do that, sell his stake without my approval? Your right of first refusal would apply, but if you can't match their offer, I need to see the documentation you've found. I'll send it over immediately. And Emily, this isn't public information yet. If Richard learns we've discovered these discussions, I understand. Thank you, Catherine. After hanging up, Emily sat motionless processing this new information. If Astra Dynamics gained a significant stake in Chen-verified security, they could potentially push for applications. She wasn't comfortable with government surveillance, military applications tools that could be used to track and identify dissidents in authoritarian regimes. Everything she'd built could be weaponized. The documentation arrived in an encrypted email 20 minutes later. Meeting notes, preliminary term sheets, emails between Richard and Astra executives, all suggesting a deal was being actively negotiated with a target closing date just 3 weeks away. Emily's first instinct was confrontation, to call Richard immediately and demand an explanation. But caution prevailed. If she revealed her knowledge prematurely, she'd lose the advantage of surprise. Instead, she called Sarah and their lead counsel, asking them to come to her office immediately. We have a situation, she told them once the door was closed. She explained what Catherine had discovered, showing them the documentation. This is a direct violation of his commitment to you, the lawyer said, reviewing the emails. He explicitly promised to maintain his investment for at least 3 years. Promises aren't legally binding, Emily pointed out. What are our options? You have right of first refusal on any share transfer. You could match Astra's offer and buy Richard out, but the offer is $80 million for his 20% stake. Sarah finished looking at the term sheet. We don't have that kind of cash, even with the Vertex investment. What about Catherine? Could Vertex increase their investment to buy out Richard? The lawyer shook his head. Not on this timeline. Due diligence alone would take weeks. Emily paced the office thinking. Then we need to make Richard's shares less valuable to Astra. Make them reconsider the acquisition. How would we do that? Sarah asked. Emily stopped pacing, an idea forming. The Chen verification protocol. It's what they really want the prediction engine applied to surveillance and intelligence gathering. What if we separated it legally from the main company, created a new entity that owns just that intellectual property with me as the sole shareholder? The lawyer considered this. It could work. We'd need to move quickly, create the spin-off entity, transfer the IP assets before Richard realizes what's happening. Wouldn't that be, I don't know, ethically questionable? Sarah asked. Using the very attribution system we created to essentially hide assets from an investor. Not hiding, Emily corrected. Protecting. The protocol was always meant to ensure proper attribution and prevent misuse. If Astra Dynamics gets control of it, it could be used for exactly the opposite, to track people without their consent, to monitor communications, to aid in surveillance. Emily's right, the lawyer agreed. This isn't about evading legitimate investor rights. It's about protecting the core technology from applications that violate its fundamental purpose. Sarah nodded slowly. Okay. So we create a new company, what Chen Protocol Inc., and transfer the IP. Then what Richard still owns 20% of Chen Verified Security. Yes, but without the protocol, the 20% is worth far less to Astra. They're after the prediction capabilities, not just another cybersecurity firm. And if Richard finds out before we complete the transfer, Emily's expression hardened, then we have a very different kind of fight on our hands, which is why we need to move fast and keep this absolutely confidential. For the next 72 hours, Emily Sarah and a small team of trusted attorneys worked around the clock to execute the plan. Chen Protocol Inc. Was incorporated with Emily as its sole shareholder. The intellectual property transfer agreements were prepared with meticulous attention to attribution rights and usage limitations. The critical moment came when Emily had to sign the final transfer documents. Once executed, the Chen verification protocol would legally belong to the new entity, not Chen Verified Security. It was a dramatic step one that would fundamentally alter the company's structure and value proposition. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked as Emily reviewed the paperwork. Once you sign, there's no going back. I'm sure, Emily replied without hesitation. This protocol was born from my experience of having my work stolen and misattributed. I won't let it become a tool for surveillance and control. She signed the documents feeling the weight of the decision, but also a deep certainty that it was the right choice. The following morning, Richard Blackwell requested an urgent meeting. His expression when he entered Emily's office was a mix of anger and grudging respect. You found out, he said without preamble, about Astra Dynamics, yes. Emily remained seated, outwardly calm despite her racing heart. When were you planning to tell me, before or after you sold them my technology? It's not that simple, Emily, Astra approached me. The offer was substantial, and their resources could have accelerated the protocol's development exponentially. Into areas I want nothing to do with: military applications, surveillance, tracking dissidents for authoritarian governments. Richard sighed, taking a seat across from her. The technology was always going to end up there eventually. These tools are too powerful to remain purely in the private sector. That's where you're wrong. The protocol was designed specifically to prevent misappropriation and misattribution. Using it to track and monitor people without their consent violates its very purpose. And I suppose you've taken steps to prevent the sale. It wasn't a question. The Chen verification protocol is no longer an asset of Chen Verified Security. It's been transferred to a separate entity under my sole ownership. Richard's face flushed. That's corporate theft, asset stripping. I could sue. You could, almost, Emily agreed calmly, but you'd lose. The transfer was completely legal, approved by the board with full documentation of the protocol's origins and ownership. And do you really want the public to know you were secretly negotiating to sell cutting-edge security technology to a defense contractor known for its work with authoritarian regimes? They stared at each other across the desk, the tension palpable. Finally, Richard laughed, a short, surprised sound. You know, Michael always said you were the dangerous one. Watch out for Emily, he told me once. She looks quiet, but she sees everything. He should know. He learned the hard way. Richard nodded, conceding the point. So where does this leave us? That depends on you. Your shares in Chen Verified Security are still valuable. We have paying clients, a strong team, and excellent prospects. But the protocol, the prediction engine, the attribution system, that's no longer on the table. Astra won't be interested without it. I know. Richard studied her, reassessing. You've outmaneuvered me, Emily. Not many people can say that. I learned from experience. Never assume the quiet ones aren't paying attention. After Richard left, Sarah joined Emily in her office. How did he take it? Better than expected. I think he respects the move in a weird way. He's a businessman after all. He understands protecting valuable assets. So what happens now? With Chen Verified Security and Chen Protocol Inc. Emily looked out at the Seattle skyline, considering the path forward. They'll operate as sister companies. Chen Verified Security will continue providing cybersecurity services. Chen Protocol will license the verification technology to approved partners who commit to ethical use standards. And Richard, I think he'll stay on as an investor in Chen Verified Security. His Astra deal is dead, but he still stands to make a good return. And he knows better than to cross me now. Sarah shook her head in amazement. You know, when we were starting out at Safeguard, I always thought Michael was the strategic one, the chess player. But it was you all along, wasn't it? Emily smiled. Not initially, but I learned. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most valuable skills. 1 month later, Emily stood on stage at the Tech Innovate Conference, the most prestigious gathering in the industry. She'd been invited to give the keynote address on the future of digital authentication. The audience was a who's who of tech leaders, investors, and journalists. Catherine Lawson sat in the front row. Richard Blackwell was notably absent. The digital world has a truth problem, Emily began. We can no longer trust what we see, hear, or read without verification. Content can be created, modified, and falsely attributed with frightening ease. And when truth becomes malleable, power accumulates to those who control the narrative. She clicked to the next slide showing the Chen Verification Protocol interface. At Chen Protocol, we believe authentication isn't just a technical challenge, it's an ethical imperative. Everyone deserves credit for their work. Everyone deserves to know when content has been modified. Everyone deserves verification of digital truth. For the next 30 minutes, she outlined how the protocol was already being implemented across industries, news organizations, verifying the authenticity of reporting, creative professionals protecting their work from unauthorized modification, academic institutions ensuring research integrity. But what excites me most, she concluded, is the democratization of verification. This isn't a tool just for large institutions or governments. It's for everyone who creates, everyone who shares, everyone who values truth in our increasingly digital world. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. As Emily stepped away from the podium, she caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, Sarah beaming with pride. Later at the reception, they found a quiet corner away from the networking chaos. Impressive speech, Sarah said, handing Emily a glass of champagne. You didn't mention Safeguard once. It wasn't relevant. This isn't about what happened before. It's about what we're building now. Still, it's quite a journey from being marched out of that office 3 months ago to keynoting the industry's biggest conference. Emily smiled, acknowledging the transformation. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you're really meant to build. Her phone buzzed with a text. Dr. Morgan. Watching the live stream. So proud of you. This is what healing looks like. Emily typed back a quick thank you, feeling the truth of those words. This was healing, not forgetting the past, but transforming it into something meaningful. Taking the pain of betrayal and using it to create tools that protected others from similar experiences. What's next for Chen Protocol? Sarah asked. Now that we've fended off Astra Dynamics and established the technology in multiple industries, Emily looked out at the crowded reception at the tech leaders who had approached her after the speech, eager to discuss partnerships and implementations. Expansion, she said decisively, not just in markets, but in application. The protocol can do more than verify authorship. It can establish provenance for physical goods, track supply chains, verify credentials, any context where truth matters. So basically everything, Sarah said with a laugh. Everything that matters, Emily corrected, which is why we need to be so careful about who we partner with and how the technology is used. As if on cue, Catherine Lawson appeared beside them. Brilliant speech, Emily. You've positioned Chen Protocol perfectly ethical technology with universal applications. Thank you. And thank you for your warning about Richard and Astra. Without that, things could have gone very differently. Catherine waved away the gratitude. I protect my investments. And more importantly, I believed in your vision from the beginning, verification technology that serves truth rather than power. Speaking of which, I have someone I'd like you to meet. She gestured to a woman standing nearby, early 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and shrewd eyes. Emily Chen, this is Senator Maria Reynolds. She's leading the Committee on Digital Authentication Standards. Senator Emily is the creator of the Chen Verification Protocol we discussed. The senator shook Emily's hand firmly. Impressive work, Ms. Chen. Your authentication system could be the foundation for new digital identity standards we're developing. Would you be open to consulting with our committee? Emily exchanged a quick glance with Sarah, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. I'd be honored, Senator, as long as the standards prioritize individual attribution rights and prevent misuse for surveillance. Those are precisely the guardrails we're trying to establish, the senator assured her. Too much authentication technology has been developed without ethical constraints. We need experts like you who understand both the technical capabilities and the human implications. As they discussed the committee's work, Emily felt a sense of purpose that went beyond business success or personal vindication. The authentication system born from her painful experience at Safeguard was evolving into something that could protect countless others from similar exploitation. The protocol that started as a way to prove I wrote this code was becoming a framework for digital truth in an increasingly synthetic world. Later that evening, as Emily stood on the balcony of her hotel room overlooking the city, she reflected on the winding path that had brought her here. The betrayal that could have destroyed her had instead forced her to become stronger, more strategic, more determined to build something that couldn't be taken away. Her phone buzzed with an email notification, a reporter requesting an interview about the Safeguard story and how it led to Chen Protocol. Emily deleted it without responding. That chapter was closed. The authentication system's origin story mattered far less than what it was becoming a tool for verification in a world increasingly filled with digital deception. What mattered now was moving forward, building technology that embodied the lessons she'd learned. Trust should always be verified. Attribution matters, and sometimes the most important code you write is the one that protects the truth.